Thank you so much for tuning into No Soundbites Allowed today. I'm the political dragon, Michael Voss, and I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Remember, on this podcast, we don't settle for sound bites. We dive deeper, challenge assumptions, and have the conversations that matter. If you liked today's show, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us your comments. Your support helps us reach more people and continue to bring you the hard-hitting discussions you won't hear anywhere else. Follow me on the major social media platforms like X, Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, and more to stay updated on upcoming episodes and join the conversation live on our next live stream. We love hearing from you and we value every perspective. We stream live, responding to your chats and calls starting at 2:30 p.m. every Sunday. Until next time, this is Michael Voss, and you've been listening to No Soundbites Allowed. Stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, don't settle for the sound bites. All right. Hello, and thank you, everybody. Hello, and thank you, everybody, for being with us today. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, the political dragon here in our offices in the Bronx, New York. I'm happy to be here with you on Sunday. It is January 19th of 2025, and the world is changing before our eyes. There is a lot of breaking news that is going on right now. I do want to address all of that, as well as many of the other issues that are affecting the United States and the world. We're going to get right into that very shortly. Now, before I do that, I do want to mention, if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, I want to welcome you. I thank you for being part of our audience. And I want you to know that your voice, whether you agree or disagree, right, left, wherever it may be, is always welcome on this channel because we believe in the First Amendment. It's not just a principle, a foundation of the United States. It is a right for everyone across the world. And we want you to celebrate that and join us in using that right on this channel every Sunday. So whether your government agrees or disagrees, whether or not the internet overlords like it or not, we will have free speech on this channel as much as we can. And we hope you will partake and join us for that. So with that said, I've been watching breaking news pretty much the entire day today. Obviously, what is happening in Israel, in Gaza, is essential to the world. This is giving us an indication of where the near term, the first 100 days of the Trump administration may in fact lead. That there will be more global stability, at least for the first 100 days, if not the first year or two, because of the Trump administration. That is a fact that is happening before our eyes. Whether you like Donald Trump or not is immaterial to the question or to the reality that the world is becoming more peaceful, more stable as we speak. That's a fact. That's a reality. Now, how long that lasts, I'm not sure. It could be, I've seen some people say it'll only last for 30 days. I've seen people say it'll last for 90. I've seen some who say it'll last for the next 4 years. That is yet to be determined. But at least for the short term, we will see more peace and more stability, but there will be other complications coming as well. And we're going to try and deal with all of that. And I look forward to hearing from everyone about these situations. Bear with me. I'm also at the same time trying to do a little bit of house cleaning here, trying to get everything updated so that you should be able to see the show on YouTube, on Facebook, on Rumble, I believe on D Live as well. So I just want to make sure all of the channels are up and live as we speak, and they should be. So I'm looking forward to everyone being able to see the show and everything that's going on there. Looks like it is. And I'll take care of Rumble. The Rumble chat, I'm getting that set as we speak. Bear with me, guys, on Rumble. I know you're out there. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Getting that set. I want to get the Rumble chat up. Bear with me. Bear with me. So that I'll be able to hear everyone. What can I say, folks? I am a one-man team trying to get this done. And that's a little tricky sometimes. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get everything prepped and ready for everyone as I would like to. And so sometimes it takes me a moment or two longer than I would expect. We do the job that we see happening, what the mainstream news media does with 10,000 employees. We try and do every week with one man, just me. And usually we do it well, I think. Hello, hot chicks. Thank you for being here. First one to make a comment today. I appreciate that. And yes, the chat is up for Rumble, so I will be able to see your comments there. Now, with that all said, I think we're kind of up to date with everything. Oh, nope, I am not. I just screwed up something. Where did I put it? Oh, there it is. No. I just screwed up my entire system here so that I could switch scenes. Sorry about that, folks. I'm just an idiot. I hit the wrong button, and that decided to remove one of the things. There it is. There it is. Okay. So, okay. What can I say? I have a cold. It's almost gone. My dog has been up sick for 3-4 days now, which has been really bad. Up at like 4:30 in the morning every day. So that's been a pain in the butt. I'm a little tired. And as I said, there's a lot of breaking news. So one of the first things I want to address in the breaking news. Yes, I have been. Yes, Grace, I have been watching Deutsche Welle, DW News. That's news out of Germany. I haven't been watching U.S. news coverage because it is highly biased and it is eliminating essential facts from the American people. I haven't been looking at the British news either. I went directly to Germany because it's somewhat of a neutral source. So I've been watching Deutsche Welle, DW News, for the last several hours now. There's been a huge number of... Who's smoking? Hot chicks. I haven't been smoking. I didn't go smoking. I've just been working on this. I wish I was smoking. Be great. I'd feel better. But let me go on. I will be talking about, obviously, the breaking news, what's going on with Israel, the hostages right now, how that's going to affect the United Kingdom, how that's affecting the United States. I'll be dealing with that in just 1 second. I did want everyone to know that, as you can see, this is TikTok. TikTok is up. TikTok is live at this moment, or at least as live as they generally are, because the Chinese Communist Party loves to edit certain stories, as you can see here. They don't let everyone see every news story, and sometimes they just keep stories under review for weeks, if not months at a time. Like when I put out my very short video, my short on Donald Trump and Greenland, and for some reason, that was controversial content on TikTok. But at the moment, they are live. People can go to there, and they are able to see it. Also, I wanted to very briefly go over that as you're seeing all the news here, I want you to understand that the final hours of the Biden administration are now upon us, and Joe Biden himself is at one of the lowest approval ratings of any president almost in modern history. He's currently at about 39.4% approval, about 55.9% disapproval, depending on which poll you look at, such as CBS News has Joe Biden at 63% disapproval. Overall, Biden's doing horribly, as you can see by the chasm here of the disparity on average, which is pretty huge. And in comparison to the fourth year, end of the presidency of, looking at Bush, we see 51.5%. Obama was at 50%. Donald Trump was at 45.9%. So this is stunning, stunningly bad, amazingly, stunningly bad. It's really bad for him. And the direction of the country as we come to the end of the Biden-Harris administration, just to put everything into perspective, only 27.9, let's round it up, 28% of the American people, on average of all the polls out there, are saying that the country has been going in the correct direction. 61.5% of the nation overall has said America is going in the wrong direction. And those numbers have been as high as 67, 68%, depending on which poll you look at, in terms of America being on the wrong track as we go into 2025, the start of the 47th president of the United States, which will once again be Donald Trump. Now, I think that data is important to understand where we stand. What are the expectations that we have as we see that hostages are being returned as we speak? And as I said, I've been watching Deutsche Welle for their news coverage. There's been a lot of news about this because the first Israeli hostages. Now, here's a problem. From the Wall Street Journal, the first Israeli hostages have been released under the Gaza ceasefire. That's not correct. It's just not the truth. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not looking at U.S. news media coverage, because they are covering up for the Biden-Harris administration and for Democrats. Just to remind everyone, there are eight British citizens of the United Kingdom that were taken hostage by Hamas 15 months ago. There were 22 Americans that were taken hostage, tortured, and sexually abused by Hamas 15 months ago. Those are the numbers that we know that have been confirmed for the last 15 months of the total of British and American citizens, civilians that were captured, that survived the initial massacre, terrorist action, and were taken as hostages, living shields, by Hamas. And Hamas, for 15 months, has refused the offer for a ceasefire by returning the hostages. That has been consistent over the last 15 months. And no matter what your feelings about Israel, no matter what your feelings about Donald Trump, the United States, or any other country, these are absolute facts. Now, why is the Wall Street Journal and all of the mainstream major news media, pretty much globally, why are they saying these are Israeli hostages? Because they do not want to talk about the number of individuals who are foreign born. Why? Because most of them are dead. In fact, in looking at the hostages that were released today, 3 women, 2 of them are Israeli, 1 is British. So that changes everything, because there is only 1 British hostage out of the 8 that is still alive after the last 15 months. All others are dead. There are no other British survivors. Hamas killed every one of the hostages. And I say very clearly for you, it was Hamas, the terrorist organization that believes in genocide, just like Harvard and Columbia. They killed the hostages. It wasn't Israel. Because every time, in the rare case, in the one case that we saw, that hostages were killed, 3 of them, by Israel, Hamas wasted no time in providing all of the evidence to show that Israel did it, and Israel admitted that and got censured by the world. It is in the best interest of Hamas, the terrorist organization, to gain political capital and to get some benefit for themselves, to notify the world every time Israel accidentally killed anyone, any hostage, anyone, in fact, that isn't Hamas. And they got that. So every one of the hostages that we are now hearing about that died, isn't because of Israel, isn't because of Israel's fight against Hamas, the global terrorist organization. It's not because of the attempted rescue efforts of Israel. It's not because of bombing of Israel. It's because of Hamas. Just as they did in September, Hamas kills hostages rather than release them. So every time that they were almost ready to be released, Hamas murdered them. Just like they murdered innocent civilians on October 7th, 2023. We cannot lose sight of these facts, this reality of the world. So Hamas has consistently rejected this. What changed? Why is there now Israeli hostages and British hostages and possibly American hostages, and I'll get to that in a second, that are going to be released now? Who's getting released? How did this come about? Donald Trump. Again, whether you like or dislike Donald Trump and his political affiliation, his political ideology, whether you like it or not, it is Donald Trump that is responsible for this. And I know that Joe Biden tried to take advantage. He said it was that even though it happened because of Trump negotiations, this was the Biden idea, his deal, and it's his credit. No, it is not. The deal from Joe Biden was in May. And from May until today, no one in the world cared. Hamas did not bend the knee. Israel would not make any corrections or any concessions to the deal. No one budged. This had nothing. And Joe Biden has given Iran and Hamas everything that he could. He built them piers for $500 million, even though it only lasted for 3 weeks. He gave them humanitarian aid, airlifted in, which supplied and supported Hamas continuing to be able to fight. He aided and supported terrorists to try and get a deal so that he had some leverage in both the election and his history. And it failed. No, it was only until in the last week, Donald Trump said, if the hostages are not released by the time he becomes president, there would be hell to pay. And he had his personnel involved in the negotiations in Qatar, emphasizing the fact that the United States was going to take action, that there was a strong leader once again in the White House, and that he would use means necessary to get those hostages back. And Hamas did not want to see what an angry American president would do to their city-state in getting back those hostages. The devastation that Israel had placed upon them was nothing in comparison. That threat resulted immediately in getting the hostages released today and going forward. That is just the reality. That is the fact. There is no dispute about that. And even the White House, under the Biden administration, has come out and said correctly that this was because of Donald Trump, not because of Joe Biden. Because there is no leader in the world that respects Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is a part-time zombie president. And the fact that he will no longer be in power going in the next 24 hours is a benefit to the world. That is my position, and that is my supposition. Now, let me check on some of the comments, because I'm pretty sure some people will have some comments about some of this already. I'm glad, Grace, that you got a notification. Most people don't, but I'm happy that you got a notification that we were on today. And I know you were watching commentary. Let's see. There have been a lot. It's about 30 to 1. The number of Palestinians that are being released, many of them members of Hamas or suspected members of Hamas, about 30 of them are being released for every one hostage that will be released. It will wind up being between 900 and 1,000 Palestinians will be released for the less than 100 living hostages. In total, there were approximately 126 hostages, not 94. You see this in the news. A lot of these numbers are misleading you. We've had the numbers for months upon months. Just like we knew for most of the last year that the number of British hostages was 8. We've known since the beginning, since November of 2023, that the number of American hostages has been 22. We've known these things. But because the news media stopped talking about the different peoples and just lumped them together as the hostages, and they didn't differentiate, they allowed the public to forget. And just as, what was it, last week, the week before, we told you, if you had looked for how many American hostages are held by Hamas, you would get multiple different answers. 8, 6, 2, 12. Different news agencies had a different number. Well, now we have a final number, which I will get to in just a moment. We have a final number of how many living American hostages are expected to be returned. And there's less than what I can count on one hand. The good news is there are Americans who are still alive. The bad news is there's less than I can count on one hand out of 22. We'll go over that in just a moment. But let me go on with some of the comments here. By the way, yes, I do smoke cigarettes. I'm not recommending anyone else do it. It's a very expensive habit, indeed. But my cold isn't from smoking. It's just a cold. It happens. It's not the pandemic, which I don't take vaccines for. It's just, cold. It's winter. But I don't think that's because I smoke. But we'll see. Grace goes on to say she's been watching the Israeli coverage and she hasn't watched the U.S. coverage because there is so much bias, which I'm showing you from the Wall Street Journal. They are not alone in this, and I will explain that more in just a moment. Let's see. Grace says, do you think the hostages would have been released had Harris win? No. Had we see a continuation of the Biden-Harris administration, the progressive policies, and more important, the weakness of the American government, no, there would be no motivation for Hamas or Iran or anyone to change any policies. Since the day that we have seen Donald Trump declared the winner of the election, we have seen globally a shift in many nations. The actions of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and in many of the terrorist organizations, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and even with Hamas, we've seen a change globally where they have stepped down their actions and prepared for retribution, for sanctions and other actions in preparation of Donald Trump taking over. That's because of the strength of Donald Trump. No country in the world respected Kamala Harris. That's just a fact. Every time that Kamala Harris was sent out around the world to negotiate or just to represent the United States, she wound up in a scandal. Look at what happened every time she went to South Korea, one of our strongest allies in Southeast Asia, and every time she showed up there, the United States were in worse relations with South Korea than before she showed up. Every single time. They stopped sending her overseas anywhere in the world because everywhere she went, she made things worse. And she was less and less respected every time. So, no, I don't think she would have made it better. She would have made it worse. We would see that this inactivity, this reluctance to have a ceasefire would have continued by Gaza because Iran would have continued to fund Gaza, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. And therefore, they have no reason to stop. But because sanctions are coming, and I'm going to get into all of this in some detail with you guys, but because sanctions are coming for Iran, and Iran is taking action now to prepare to have less availability of money, less availability of international trade, they are hunkering down, and that means less money for the Houthis, for Hezbollah, for Hamas, and therefore all of those groups are basically calming down. And the world is becoming more stable for it. There is less terrorism in the world since Donald Trump won the election in 2024 than we have seen in the last 4 years. That's a fact. and it will continue to improve, I believe, and I will give you the reasoning for that in just a moment. Let me see. Grace says she thought that the Wall Street Journal was conservative. They are. Relative to most news media in the United States, the Wall Street Journal is a conservative news source. And I know almost all of the news sources that we use on this channel, about 80-90% of all news sources, are always left-leaning. But the fact is, even on the right, when you look at the mainstream news media and the way they have covered Hamas and the hostages, it has been pretty much uniform. They stopped talking about how many Americans were held hostage by Hamas back in January of 2024. That's pretty much the last time you've seen identifiable articles and news stories that actually said how many Americans were held hostage out of the total, and they just stopped talking about it. And they just lumped everyone as the hostages. So that's something we've seen consistent in major mainstream news media. And you would have to go overseas to alternate other news agencies, whether it be The Guardian or Deutsche Welle, Nippon News, the Hindustan Times, or Israeli news. You'd have to go outside, even Al Jazeera, which I don't think is a reliable source, but even there, you'd have to go to different sources to get the actual numbers and updates, which I have followed. Grace says, do you think Netanyahu should have made this deal? I do. She does, but would like to know what I think. Okay. By the way, hi, hello, happy life. I'm happy to see you there, and I'm happy to see you're doing well. Yes, Netanyahu is going to have some issues as a result of this deal that he's made. That's true. But I do believe that this deal, there could have been a better one. There could have been a better deal negotiated. And I think that the Trump administration would have been able to do that, but that would have extended the amount of time that the hostages would remain in the hands of Hamas, which means they would have been tortured more, means they would have been sexually abused more, something that the UN has confirmed each and every one of the hostages did suffer being tortured and sexually abused. So that I'm quoting the UN on this. That was based on the UN report from December 2023. Nothing has come out since to refute that has continued to happen. And I think the Trump administration correctly recognized the longer that the hostages, all American hostages in particular, were in the hands of Hamas, the more likely they were to die. That almost all of the hostages had already died, and just given more time, they die. So to get them back as soon as possible is a positive for an example of the strength of U.S. diplomacy, an example of strength of American leadership, a focus of U.S. foreign policy. We have a definitive outlook now, and we have a willingness, which I think is maybe the most important thing, a willingness to take action to support our ideology, that you don't mess with American civilians, that you don't mess with America lightly, that it will be taken harshly, and there will be a significant cost for that. I think he accomplished all of that without having to extend the time that Americans had to suffer in this limbo. So I think Netanyahu was looking at a similar thing where he had a lot of pressure from the United States to finally take action. He has a leader that he can trust will back up Israel. Donald Trump will continue to back up Israel, and he will do so forcefully, unlike Joe Biden, who was kicking and screaming every time he tried to do anything and tried to tie everything to help Israel to the Ukraine. And that was, for Joe Biden, the Ukraine was more important than the Americans being held hostage by Hamas. It was more important than our only ally in the Middle East. It was more important than all other foreign policy. In fact, for the Biden-Harris administration, the only foreign policy was the Ukraine, and everything was centered on that. Now we are seeing a difference. We are seeing a policy that is focused on Americans, not necessarily any one conflict, not necessarily any one event, but it is focused on the American citizens and their safety and the preservation of America being strong and being willing to respond. I think that's important. So I think Netanyahu had to balance those issues. I have a strong leader who will definitively and definitely support Israel, or I have a weak president, or I can try and go at my own. And of the options in front of him, I think he made the right choice. And I think long term, it will have the greatest amount of benefit towards Israel. Because in doing what in agreeing to the terms, and more importantly, with Hamas agreeing to the terms, he really didn't have an out. The biggest thing that has stopped for the last 15 months, the reason why there hasn't been a ceasefire has been because Hamas has said no, they wouldn't give back the hostages. That was their bargaining chip. And they wanted as much as they could get with that bargaining chip. And that's what they did in every single negotiation with Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, under the Biden-Harris administration. They always asked for more, and they got more humanitarian aid, which would be oil, gasoline, fuel, food, water, which was instantly taken in large part by Hamas to continue to fight against Israel. So this was a positive. The longer they could stretch it out under the weak presidency of the Biden administration, the more supplies that Hamas would get to be able to continue to fight to genocide Israel. That's their thinking. They now no longer have that. And I think that was the biggest motivation. So I think I answered your question there, Grace. And if I haven't, please let me know. But I think I kind of summed that up. Grace goes on to say, broad question, but how will Trump deal with Hamas? Can they be neutralized if not destroyed? Difficult. Possible, yes. Difficult, extremely so. And I'm not sure that the American people have the will as a nation to do so. Obviously, I'm not talking about Columbia or Harvard or Cornell University or UCLA. I'm not talking about the colleges and their intelligentsia that are on the side of genocide, that support genocide, especially specifically the genocide of Israeli people. I'm not talking about them. They are a minor sliver of the population of the United States. Throwing them out, I don't think the American people have the will to go to war. All out, full on, direct war in Gaza. Even though it is a terrorist nation, even though they have attacked Americans, this is not the first time. Even though they have killed Americans, this is not the first time. I don't think we have the will to wipe out that terrorist organization or any terrorist organization around the world. The bad taste that has been left in our mouths because of Iraq and Afghanistan have not gone away. And so the public doesn't have the will to wage an extended, specific war against terror in that manner. Thus, these groups continue to exist. So I think that's the answer about dealing with Hamas. Could we do it? Yes. And we would do so by the American troops landing in Gaza and conducting basically a search and destroy mission to destroy the infrastructure and the leadership and the secondary leadership of Hamas, wherever and everywhere that they exist, which would inevitably lead us into a conflict with Iran. There's no two ways around it. If we were to try and take out Hezbollah or Hamas or the Houthis, we will be in conflict with Iran. Those are their puppets. And as they are their puppets, Iran will support them. They will defend them. And therefore, that would put America in direct military conflict with Iran. And that means a major war. This would not be like Afghanistan. It would not be like Iraq. This is a second world army with nuclear capabilities, because I do believe that Iran has had nuclear capabilities for some time now. Whether or not they admit that is another question. And I don't think Iran wants the world to know exactly when they have nuclear weapons, because the new set of sanctions, the new actions of each nation would instantly kick in if Iran is a nuclear power. That changes the world dynamic completely. Once it is confirmed and known, they get treated very, very differently, not in a positive way, kind of like North Korea. And they're not ready for that. They're not self-sufficient. They don't have supply lines with China and Russia that are strong enough to be able to survive the way the world would then treat Iran, which would be to starve them out, to foment insurrection within Iran, to change the government, and from external forces. I mean, there's already internal forces to change Iran and its government, but if they are confirmed as a nuclear power, then the world will, almost universally, come together to try and force a change of government in Iran and starve them out, not just with sanctions, but to literally just basically blockade the nation until they either starve and start a civil war, or politically they start a civil war. Either way. But that's a long-term action. That's something that takes a decade or two to fully implement. And I don't think the American people have the will for that. Not at this moment. Not after so recently going through Iraq and Afghanistan and the consequences. Those conflicts being different, though, because the American government didn't have a definitive goal. We didn't have an end point. Why did we go into Afghanistan? To get Osama bin Laden? That's not really a reason. Why did we go into Iraq? To get Osama bin Laden? To fight Al-Qaeda? And then what? And then what do we get? What is our reward? What do we get out of that? I've always had a problem with those wars because there's never been an answer to, and what do we get? Yes, that terrorist group is gone. Another one will replace it. That is the nature of the world. Terrorist organizations always exist. Another one, the PKK, would take its place. ISIS would come in and surge. There will always be another one. So we haven't ended the threat. We've ended one threat, but not the overall threat of terrorism. And getting rid of this leader or that leader of this terrorist organization, that doesn't end that terrorist organization. So we need something else. We need something concrete. If it were up to me, and my suggestion, and I've said it many times on this channel, the way do we end that? We go and we take it over. If we took over Afghanistan, we would have ended the threat of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and ISIS in Afghanistan. It would become a commonwealth of the United States. We would raise the quality of life in Afghanistan. We would raise the value of being in Afghanistan. We just by nature of being a commonwealth and being able to trade with U.S. dollars, by giving women the right to read and write and to work, to improve the quality of schools and water and sewage and electricity and develop cities, we would raise the quality of life if we had taken over Afghanistan. That's worth 20 years of fighting. Beating or trying to beat the Taliban isn't worth 20 years of fighting. It's not worth several $1 trillion. It's just not worth it. But if we were taking it over, it is. Same thing for Iraq, and same thing going forward in any military action. If we're going to fight Iran, take Iran over. Otherwise, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to just fight and get rid of the Ayatollah. Who replaces the Ayatollah? ISIS? Al-Qaeda? The Taliban? Some other group that's just as terrorist, just as genocidal, just as much of a group of terrorists? It's not worth it. We have to, and I know people will go, but that's colonialism. Maybe. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, per se. So that's the issue. And I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you guys. These are things that if you've been watching the channel, if you're new, it may sound like, oh my God, there's so much there. It's a big subject. It's a big issue. It has been an issue for decades, and it will continue to be a big issue going forward, no matter who's president. And we have to address this with clear thoughts. Whether or not you agree with my thoughts, immaterial. I may be wrong. Maybe you have a better plan. But if we do not have the discussion, and if we do not present that discussion to the people we choose to lead the nation, those elected officials, if they're not hearing these conversations, then we're getting nothing. And nothing will improve. The status quo will continue, and the world will continue to be going through phases of great instability and great terror. We need to change that. And that means we need to make a definitive choice, whatever that choice may be. My thought is, if we want to fix this, we have to deal with Iran. That is the root of the problem. That is the source. That is the funding. That is the organization. That is the main plague in the Middle East. And if we deal with that, we then change the entire environment, and probably for the better. Based on what I can understand about the interactions that are going on, if we deal with Iran and we change, and Iran becomes a commonwealth of the United States, the Middle East becomes a much better place. If another government that is not a terrorist organization, not a fanatical religious organization, were to take over Iran, we would see a change instantly throughout the Middle East. There would be more peace and stability. But are we willing to commit to that? Probably not. Because we have far too many far leftists in the American government and in the government, in that mindset, as trained by the institutions, education system in the United States. In particular, not just in the colleges, but in high schools as well. They are far more socialist leaning, and they are far more forgiving of terrorism, and that's a problem. That's a lot. That's a lot. I know. It's a lot of information, but I am trying to answer. And by the way, folks, as you can see, Grace is asking questions, and I know Happy Life is watching, and Happy Life, by the way, is in Thailand right now. So we have an international audience. I know Hot Chicks is with us, and I know there are many others. The channel is highly suppressed, but we do reach an international audience of over 100 countries. So I'm always willing to hear your thoughts, no matter what country you're in. In the United Kingdom, in Sweden, in Italy, we have people watching in Japan and Australia. Please, if you think I am incorrect, do tell me. But it is the understanding of these events. We have to have this conversation. We have to have it as a nation. Otherwise, in not taking action, we fail. And we get more events like we saw on October 7th, 2023, than peace. That's just the fact. So let me go back into the comments here. Grace says, are we headed into a conflict with Iran? Yes. Matter of fact, we have been in a conflict with Iran. Kind of like a Cold War situation, very much like that, in Iran for the last 40 years. We are one of the primary threats. Iran has stated very clearly and has never changed its opinion that the United States is either the primary or secondary threat to Iran's existence. They've said that since 1980. They have never changed their opinion. They have never changed their language. They have every day, Iran says death to America. The Ayatollah, whether it's Khomeini or Khamenei or the next one to replace, whoever replaces Khamenei, who's in charge right now, they all say the same thing, death to America. They have never given that up. That is one of their goals as a nation. And that's a war. That's a Cold War. They can't do much about it besides acts of terrorism around the world targeting Americans and Israelis. That's their primary goal. They will attack Europe. They will take opportunities to attack the United Kingdom and other nations whenever possible. They will fight with the Saudi Arabians and other Middle Eastern nations. But their primary thought is destroy Israel, destroy the United States. That's where they've been for 40 years. We are in a war. It's not just a war of ideas. It is a full-on, active shooting war. We're just not fighting. They're fighting. They're fighting through their puppets, which would be Hezbollah and the Hamas and the Houthis. They're fighting. They're actively encouraging and orchestrating acts of terror that take out American citizens, British citizens, Europeans, and Israelis on a regular basis. So we're in a war. The only reason we don't think of it that way is the news media doesn't talk about it that way. But it is the reality. So it's not quite the Cold War like we had with Russia, but it's not quite the fighting, shooting war that we had like with Korea. We're in between those two extremes. I don't know what you would call it. A lukewarm war? We are fighting. It's just no one wants to recognize that, because when you do, then you have to take action. If you recognize what they have been doing for the last 45, 50 years, since 1980, you have to take action if you recognize that as what it is, what Iran has declared it to be, a war. A war that only ends, according to Iran, with the genocide of the United States. Regardless of whether you in the United States are a leftist, a socialist, a progressive, they don't care. They don't care. If you are or you support the LGB alphabet, they want them dead. And if you support them, they want you dead. If you believe that women should be able to read and write, drive a car, go to work, they want you dead. Almost every value we have as an American, as a Western nation, as a first world nation, they want us dead. This is what they have been fighting against for 40, almost 50 years. So, yeah, we are in a war. Just no one likes to talk about it that way. Okay, let me go on. Hey, Dal is over on Rumble. Thank you for making comments over at Rumble, Dal. Dal says, we almost had the change in Iran that we had hoped to see when the Iranian people were starting to rise against the Ayatollah's regime during the heaviest enforcement of the sanctions. There was the green movement in Iran under President Obama. That was during the summer of, what did he call it? The summer of change, or it was something like that. The Arab Spring, that's what it was. They called it the Arab Spring. I believe that was 2012. And Obama was talking about, oh, see how all of the Middle East is changing and it's not nearly as bad as you thought it was. And the Iranian people were rising up against the Ayatollah. And Obama did nothing. He said, oh, great. Good luck with that. Did not support them in any way, shape, or form. He didn't even speak about how great a job they were doing trying to rise up the moderates in Iran. He said nothing about it. He said, oh, yeah, it's a green movement. Okay, good to see that. Tell me if you win. That's what Obama said. And they got crushed. Utterly, absolutely crushed. And so, since that time, 2012, we have seen that the Iranian people are, while they do have protests from time to time, they're afraid to take any further action other than to protest, oh, you killed this reporter, you stoned this woman to death for letting us see her hair. A protest about, oh, you poisoned schoolgirls because they were learning to read and write. There have been protests, but they won't go any further because they don't believe the United States will support them. Because Obama taught them, the Iranian people, that we won't. And that's one of the impediments about making that change in Iran by the Iranian people. Whether or not anyone else in the world wants it, the Iranian people would probably take further action if they believed that the United States would support them. But Obama taught them, no, that wouldn't happen. And Biden reinforced that thought. Let's see. Dow says it was Biden's reversal and continued pursuance of an Iranian deal that allowed the Ayatollah regime to reassert control over the populace and resuppress its dissidents. Well, again, I would disagree with that, and this is the comment from Dow over on Rumble, so thank you for the comment on Rumble. But Dow, I disagree with that in that, as I said, this has to do with Obama. This goes back to Obama and the Green Movement in Iran in 2012. And so, yes, Biden was no benefit, and his support and removal of sanctions against the ruling party, the Ayatollah, under the Biden administration, over 24 sanctions were removed. Actually, well more than, closer to 36 sanctions that were restricting and strangling the Iranian theological government and causing them to have friction with the people and to help change that nation, to give some support to the moderates in Iran. Biden cut that off at its legs. And so he did help the Ayatollah regain and reassert hardline control over Iran. That's true. But the roots of that go back to the Obama administration. So I do still blame Obama more. But thank you for that comment. Grace says, people yell colonialism when they don't have an answer to the geopolitics of the Middle East. Well, there's a lot of people who've been trained by colleges to say, oh, it's colonialism. You're just trying to be a colonizer. One, every nation that exists today colonized. They always like to make it seem like America's the only ones who've ever had slaves. Slavery is a global thing, and it still exists to this day. In fact, it's rampant throughout Africa. It's not a U.S. issue. It's a global issue. It's part of global history for every nation in the world. Every nation in the world that exists right now has had slavery, all of them. And some of them still to this day still do. So that's not a U.S. thing. Oh, you're a colonizer. Every nation that exists today, if you can name that nation, if they have a name, they are, in their history, they have been colonizers. They have taken over land from some other group, some other nation, and they have now controlled it. They are all. There is no nation on the face of the earth at this moment that didn't colonize to some degree. Whether it was one nation or multiple, doesn't matter. They've all done it. It's not an American issue. But the U.S. education system, the indoctrination towards progressivism, likes people to think it's only the Americans that have ever done it. Only the Americans have done this, and how terrible. It's history. Just read history, which they don't like to discuss. They like to rewrite the history, to recontextualize the history. But the fact is, there is no nation on the face of the earth that didn't colonize. There is no nation on the face of the earth that didn't have slaves. None. So that's part of the big problem that we're dealing with. Let me go through, a couple more comments, and then we're going to go back to the breaking news today. But I like to hear your comments, folks. Whether you agree or disagree, I always like to hear your comments. Grace goes on to say, do you think the world feels slightly more stable with Trump having won the election? She does. Don't agree with all of his domestic policies, but support him on the global stage entirely. Well, to answer that question, yes, as I said earlier in the show, it is demonstrable that the world is becoming more stable, more peaceful, because Trump won the election than any time beforehand. In the 4 years beforehand, we didn't have this stability. We had chaos. We had many nations, that would be Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, many of the puppet governments. We've seen many nations around the world. In Africa, you had the Sudan and the fighting there, Burkina Faso. We've seen globally that the amount of conflict and the nature of the conflicts have reduced to some extent, a large extent overall, because Trump, from the moment Trump was announced going forward, and the closer we've gotten to the inauguration, the more that we've seen many of these rogue nations have prepared themselves for a Trump administration. Iran is a great example. I was explaining this last week. Iran started selling off some of its excess oil to build up $1 billion in reserves, which is money that they would use to fund for the next 4 years Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas, because they give about $100 million a year to each of those organizations. So that's $300 million a year, 4 years, about $1.2 billion. And they sold enough oil to raise about $1 billion, maybe $1.2 billion in cash. So they're using that to continue to control their puppets, to be able to continue to fund those puppets at current levels. And that's all done because Trump will reignite and reinstitute the sanctions that he had on Iran previously. Those sanctions were effective. So Iran is taking advantage of the weakness of the Biden administration, the loopholes that were allowed, the 36 sanctions that Biden removed. They're using that to be able to fund terrorism into the future. But that doesn't escalate the amount of terrorism. That reduces it, at least short term. So that's one aspect of it. And we've seen a lot of countries, like in Italy, in Sweden, Norway, we've seen in Poland, Germany, pretty much almost everywhere except France in Europe, have been moving towards what they consider the center, centrist to right, which here in the United States would be moderate Democrat. And they've been making that move, which is more in line with where Donald Trump stands. And so that has, the stronger that Trump has been in the polling, the more likely it seemed that he was going to win, the more that gave the people of Europe again, it was a beacon. If the United States is moving more towards the right, that they could move more to the right, or at the very least, stop moving left. So we have seen that positive impact. And as nations move more to the right, they give less opportunity for global terrorism. You have more and more nations closing down open borders. That doesn't mean immigration stops. It means that open borders and illegal immigration stops. That there is more selectivity in who gets to enter your nation and go on to the next nation. And because of that selectivity and that weeding out in determining the background of individuals that are coming into each of these nations, you reduce the number of terrorists that enter into each nation, and therefore less problems in each of those nations. And we're seeing that. Again, that's happened in Italy, that's happened in Sweden, and it's happened in Germany. It's happening in many nations. And it's happening now to an extent to the United States. And so we will see that that has a positive impact. So yes, he has had a very positive impact there. And that's why, and again, we were far more stable under the Trump administration than in the Obama administration or in comparison to the Biden administration. The world was much more peaceful under Trump than under Obama or Biden. We have no reason to believe it won't be again, and we have seen the indication that the world agrees. So there's that. Let's see. Grace says, I would have never heard of you. I would never have heard of you had it not been for the New York gubernatorial candidate, Larry Sharpe. Larry is a great guy, and he is my friend. By the way, I should mention, tomorrow, Monday, which will be Martin Luther King's birthday. It's a holiday for most people, and it will be the inauguration for Donald Trump. That is all happening tomorrow. And I did have tickets to go to D.C. I had a couple of offers for tickets to get into the inauguration indoors in Washington, D.C. And I turned them down because it would be, one, I don't have unlimited funds to get housing, to rent a hotel room. get down there, get back. It's just too expensive. And on top of that, I did have plans, and I am going to be speaking with Larry Sharpe tomorrow. I will be live on Larry Sharpe's The Sharpe Way tomorrow night, talking with him about the inauguration, about what we can expect for America in 2025. So it's funny that you bring up Larry, who is a good friend of mine. And for people who don't know, Larry Sharpe is a libertarian. He's a former Marine, a libertarian. He's run for governor twice, and he's a friend of mine. I've known him for about a decade, maybe a little bit more now that I've known Larry, and we're good friends personally. I know him professionally, and I also know him personally. And so we hang out every so often. And I'm going to be doing the show with him tomorrow. So that should be interesting. But yes, I was invited to go to Washington, D.C. Yes, I did have a ticket, actually two, to go down to D.C. to see the inauguration in person. And I didn't do it for a couple of reasons. Again, money, transportation. Also, it's just too hectic for me to, because if I'm going, I obviously will be, I would have been covering it live in person, and that would have been far too hectic. There's going to be huge numbers of people there. So that's why I didn't go, just so you guys know. All right. So I think I've caught up with many of the comments. By the way, please, folks, if you have found anything that I've said so far to be informative, whether you find it informative or educational or you just think it's funny, whatever your reason, if you've been listening with us for the last, it's been an hour so far, then please like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Allow us to be able to reach more people, to have this conversation, and it is a conversation, with not just you, but many people around the world, across the United States and across the rest of the globe. Let's have these conversations because they are absolutely important. It helps for our leaders to understand where the public stands because we are the government. They represent us. And they need to be reminded from time to time, they're not in charge. We are. And we need to have the conversations to let them know this is what's on our mind and this is the way we want it resolved. These are the issues. It's not climate change. It's not the number one issue in America or the world. It's not. I know some politicians want it to be because it's good for them. It's good for their donors. And so they want it to be about climate change. It's not the number one issue in the world. And because you had the Biden administration and many progressives talking about, well, climate change is the most important thing, that's why Americans were being tortured for 15 months. It's the reason why we had to run away from Afghanistan. It's part of the reason why the Biden-Harris administration abandoned 70,000 Americans in 4 years. They're all connected. They're focused on climate change, which you may or may not believe, and I do not believe is man-made. And they're focused on that, and they let everything else go. And that everything else is the safety of you, the American citizen, which we have seen play out. And it's been, not just with Lake and Riley, but in so many cases, we've seen it destroy our infrastructure in New York, Boston, Chicago, LA. We've seen infrastructures across the country have been destroyed. We've seen apartment buildings and American citizens in New York, in Aurora, Colorado, where gangs are taking over our hotels. They're selling drugs. They're selling illegal weapons. They're having fights with police officers. Possibly, it's been rumored and it's unconfirmed that they helped to spread the fires in California. There's a lot of problems. And that's because we've been focused on climate change is the issue when it's not. It's not the primary issue we have to deal with. It's not the first thing we need to take care of. It's really not. And it's so much hubris to believe that the same scientific body, the world, that can't tell you the weather tomorrow is the same body that has made predictions since 1958 about the climate, and not once have they ever been correct. It's something that the media doesn't like to remind you about, but every single prediction about the climate since 1958 has been wrong. All of them. Everything they have ever predicted. Not one climatologist has gotten it right. All of the national issues, whether it's global freezing, global warming, global famine, every one of their predictions has been wrong. Every single time. And yet we're trying to change the world and world policy and world economics as if that is correct. And we have no evidence, no reason to believe that they are going to be correct anytime in the future. Because they keep repeating the same things that they have always said, and they have never been right. It's like a broken clock, except it's never been right to this day. And they're hoping that sometime in the future, they'll eventually be right. It doesn't make sense. And meanwhile, everything else is falling apart. So, yeah, Larry is a great guy. I know, I went the long way around to answering that. But like, share, subscribe. Please, please do. It is important. And I suppose I should pause for a second and also mention that I know normally you can call into the program. I changed my phone. I now have a Samsung S24. And because I'm able to I got the upgrade on my phone, it doesn't have the same connection to my system, my computer system, to be able to get audio. And because of that, I have to get a couple of new cords. And it's not expensive, but I just got to get the new cords so that we can take phone calls again. I believe that you are able to reach me on Facebook. If you're already a Facebook friend of me, you are able to call in through Facebook, and we will be able to hear you there. But otherwise, at the moment, I can't take phone calls. And I apologize for that, but that's why I don't take calls at the moment. We'll get this fixed by next week, I believe. So let me go back to what's happening, because we have the first Israelis. And if you notice, and by the way, you can search this, and I'll show you. If you do a search on this term, and you look for any American, just America or American from the Wall Street Journal, not once is it mentioned. We're talking about hostages. There were 22 Americans taken hostage by Hamas on October 23rd, October 7th of 2023. This article from the Wall Street Journal doesn't mention any of them, not one. So let's take a look at, this is Iran. I'll get to that in 1 second. There's the Houthis. Where was it? No, I want to get to the breaking news on. Now, one of the reasons why there has been such a discrepancy, why, if you're looking at the news today, they're talking about 33 Israeli hostages. And that's not correct. Because one of the hostages right now, one of the 3 women that were released today, is a British citizen, a citizen of England, the United Kingdom. But why isn't the news media talking about her and saying it's 2 Israeli women and 1 British citizen? Why do they not mention that? Because they're calling them all Israelis. Well, every Jewish person is an Israeli citizen. That's part of their citizenship law. If you are Jewish, you are automatically an Israeli. You can go to Israel. Everyone. Israel will never deny anyone who is Jewish going to Israel. You're instantly an Israeli citizen. Now, they use this, the news media, so that since everyone who is Jewish can be and presumably is an Israeli citizen, so they get to then misrepresent and say, well, all of the Israelis that are held right now are everyone who's being held by Hamas, they're all Israelis, all 33. That's not true. And they do this so that they don't have to remind the public that there are American citizens who have been taken hostage. They don't have to discuss the problem. And this first phase, and again, here it is. This is from the BBC. The first phase, lasting 6 weeks, should see a total of 33 Israeli hostages held by Hamas exchanged for 1,900 Palestinian detainees. That's not correct. That's not correct. That's not the truth. Because as I said, today, as an example, a British citizen was one of the 3 that got released, not an Israeli. But depending on which news source you go to, they'll either be described as an Israeli or as a citizen of some country. They do this because the various countries, in particular in the United Kingdom and in the United States, the reason why they're calling everyone Israeli is to hide the fact that they're actually citizens, because the citizens are dead. This happens to come from NPR. And according to NPR, on January 18th, yesterday, there are 3 Americans who are alive. 22 Americans were taken hostage. We know this as a fact. We know that of those 22 taken hostage on October 7th, in November, 3 were released. 2 older women and 1 young child. So that left us with 19 Americans held by Hamas. 2 were killed by Hamas. The most recent one that we know of for sure was this fall in September. A 22-year-old man was shot in the head dead by Hamas rather than allow him to be rescued by Israeli forces. He was literal minutes away from being rescued, and Hamas shot him in the head to kill him, to spite the Israeli government, to spite the American people. They killed him rather than let him go back to his family. This happened twice, that Hamas killed the American citizen they had as a hostage rather than release them, just to spite America and Israel. So that brings us to 17. These are confirmed people that were either released or killed by Hamas. 5 in total. 5. And that leaves us 17 Americans. 17. We know 3 are alive. 14 are dead. This is according to NPR. That's as of January 18th. At this moment, according to NPR, there's only 7. Where are the other 10? They say there's only 7 Americans because they're counting everyone else as an Israeli, to make the number look smaller, to be able to not say that Joe Biden completely screwed up for the last 15 months. So that Democrats who didn't talk about this, didn't try and get these American citizens back, they failed, and to minimize the embarrassment for the Democrats in power, the Biden-Harris administration, to minimize the historic failures that they had, they're calling those 10 Americans Israelis. Most likely because they're Jewish. And if they're Jewish, that means they're automatically a citizen of Israel. Therefore, they can call them Israelis, even though they are actually American citizens. These are the games that the mainstream news media is playing with you. This is how they excuse this. This is why. And if you're looking at this, oh, well, I love this. Look at how NPR is putting this. Yesterday, NPR. These are the U.S. citizens held hostage in Gaza. Well, if 4 of the 7, if you're saying there's 7 hostages, even though there's actually 17, but if NPR is talking about 7 citizens and 4 of them are dead, well, then there's only 3 citizens, not 7. Why are you telling me 7? There's only 3. Everyone else is dead. And then they show us the pictures. But, but he's deceased. They're showing us he's deceased. She's dead. He's dead. Why are you showing me pictures of people who are dead? Oh, because it's meant to make you think there are more Americans and more Americans that are alive. They're playing games with you mentally. They're trying to make you think that there was a success here, that the Democrats and Joe Biden were able to successfully get the Americans out. And even though they have to be honest that this is bleak and this was a failure, to minimize that failure. Well, he got 3 of them back, but there was only 7. No, there were 17. Oh no, that's too big a number. That looks too bad. That looks really, really terrible. We can't say that Joe Biden let 14 Americans die without any reaction by the American government. That Joe Biden failed to do anything to either get those Americans home sooner or to punish Hamas. And in fact, he rewarded Hamas. He gave them a pier. He sent over humanitarian aid while there was a conflict, while the Americans were being held hostage, which is against America's policy. We don't negotiate, or we're not supposed to negotiate, with anyone who takes Americans hostage. We're not supposed to make deals for hostages. That's a fact. That's part of American law. We're not supposed to support terrorist organizations. That's a law. It is a crime to help a terrorist organization. Yet Joe Biden built a pier for Hamas. He got food and fuel and money and water to Hamas. He was helping Hamas. So to make people not think about that, they hid the numbers. Again, what did they do? Same thing as what they did, as the Wall Street Journal is reporting. They called everyone an Israeli. They're not. They're not Israelis. They're Americans. And so those 10 who were Jewish, to my best knowledge, those were 10 Jewish Americans, which instantly means since Jewish people are citizens of Israel, therefore they're Israelis. So we don't have to call them Americans, so it doesn't look as bad. I got to tell you, that's infuriating to me. Aggravating and infuriating. And this is why you will see in American news media and most of the news media around the world will not refer to the number of hostages per country. They did back in November of 2023. They stopped in January of 2024. They stopped referring to how many people in each nation, and they just called them either Israelis or hostages because they wanted to minimize the pushback and the reaction, the backlash that would affect each government. This is true for Starmer and Rishi Sunak, the prime ministers of the United Kingdom. They looked like, and accurately, that they failed the British people. They didn't resolve this, and their people died as a result. So that's why today, most publications around the world are saying that the British citizen was an Israeli. They're misidentifying her so that the British government doesn't look bad when they have to turn around and then tell the British people, yes, out of the 8 hostages held by Hamas, 7 of them are dead. 1 came home. 1. And for the last 15 months, they did nothing to be able to get those people home. They weren't able to get any of their people home. They could have negotiated, and they did try to negotiate, and they failed. They gave Hamas more and more. They were also part of those who were using the pier built by the United States, by Joe Biden. They were using that to bring food and water and fuel to Hamas. They were helping to support the terrorist organization Hamas for the last 15 months, and it got them nothing. All of their people died except 1. That's horrifying. And they know that the Rishi Sunak government, the Liz Truss government, the Starmer government, the administrations in England would all suffer if the public knew the truth. That there would be a backlash for letting their people die. And that is no different than here in the United States. The backlash, if the average American citizen was aware that for the last 15 months, Americans were tortured to death, sexually abused to death, that the Biden-Harris administration did virtually nothing except help the terrorists kill American citizens, there would be outrage, regardless of your political identification. Whether you're a Democrat, a Libertarian, a Conservative, Green Party, Socialist Party, if you identify as an American citizen, you would be livid to hear that the Biden administration was giving hundreds of billions of dollars of your money to Hamas. Hundreds of millions of dollars of your tax dollars were going to help support Hamas as they killed American citizens. There would be massive backlash. You think that Kamala Harris lost badly? It would have been embarrassing. It would have been one of the worst blowouts in the history of American elections if the American people knew the truth. So instead, they call them Israelis. Instead, the news media lies. Now, I know someone's going to say, but Mike, how do you know the Israelis lied? The American government lied about calling everyone an Israeli. Because we've been tracking this for 15 months. I have mentioned the Hamas every single live stream I have done over the last 15 months. Every single week, we have mentioned the Hamas hostages. Whether the mainstream news media was talking about it or not, this channel talked about them every single week. We have been searching for news about those hostages every single week for 15 months. And we have told you every new development for 15 months. We've been following this every single day. So yeah, I can say these numbers accurately. You can go back through any of the live streams for 15 months. And we went a year and a half without a break. So continuously for the last year and a half, you can go back and look at each and every one of our videos and you will see exactly what's been happening with the hostages. We have always brought them up in every single live stream. And we have provided sources over and over again, every single week for a year and a half. This is the game that's being played and covering up your eyes. And I find it abysmal. Abysmal. Now, I know that we have Antony Blinken, the Biden administration, is trying to make this seem better. You know, Blinken says Hamas gained as many new fighters as it lost since the war has been going on, even as there's been a hostage, the ceasefire negotiations were going on. And they were trying to say, you know what? There's nothing that America could have done. Hamas, the whole fight since October 7th, 2023, it resulted in nothing changing. That's not true. That's not even accurate. Remember, according to Harvard, according to Columbia, according to some of the news media, there are no fighters in Hamas. Every time you have ever heard about this, you have been told that there are 20 or 40,000 Palestinians that died. According to Gaza, the government, which is Hamas, there's only been 20, 30, 40,000 Palestinians that have died in the war. How can Hamas replace fighters if there are no fighters? Hamas has said zero. There have been zero. According to Hamas, 0 fighters have died. 0. Just Palestinian people. Just innocent civilians. This is the way that you have been lied. They have lied to you. To all those college students. Oh my God, it's 40,000 innocent civilians. No, it's not. I'm not saying that there aren't civilians that have not been caught in the collateral that they have died. Yes, some have. But here's the thing. Do the math. logically, stop being emotional. Think about this for a second. We're saying, Antony Blinken, the Biden administration are saying, well, all of the fighters for Hamas were replaced. But Hamas says there are no fighters. There's only Palestinians. So either some of those Palestinians that they're claiming are all innocent civilians and they all were just murdered by Israel, either some of them are fighters and are terrorists and part of the army of Hamas, or none of them exist. Either there was nothing to replace, or you have been lied to for 15 months, if not longer. Hamas has an army. And according to media that isn't as controlled by the White House, and we know for a fact, according to Mark Zuckerberg, according to the Twitter files, we now get more and more evidence. We know the White House has been influencing. The Biden-Harris administration has directly told news media and social media what to say and what not to say, to censor any unapproved message, any unapproved discussion. We know for a fact they are censoring and suppressing the conversations. Part of that is suppressing what's actually happening with Hamas. 20,000, maybe 25,000 Hamas fighters, Hamas terrorists have been killed. Now, according to Antony Blinken, they've gotten it's about 18,000 new fighters have come to replace the 25,000 that got killed. That's what Antony Blinken's saying. And that's his excuse why the United States wasn't able to be more involved. We didn't want to get into it because we knew that the Palestinian people would rise up and join with Hamas. That's what his excuse is. I don't agree. I don't think that's correct. I don't think any of the numbers that we've gotten, and again, it takes just 30 seconds to logically think through. The numbers that everyone is quoting, that the New York Times, that Columbia and Harvard are quoting, comes from Hamas itself. Hamas says there are no fighters, it's all civilians. Then there's no one to replace. If there is someone to replace, and you believe in the Biden-Harris administration, if you believe them that almost all the fighters were replaced, well then Hamas is lying to you. What a shock. They're terrorists. Yes, we have made a difference. And things did change. And that does have an impact going forward, positive and negative. But I just wanted to point out how you've been lied to on so many levels. They're not American citizens, they're Israelis. Well, they happen to be American citizens who are Jewish. Oh, but there's been Hamas has no fighters, except they replaced all their thousands of fighters who have died in the fighting. Oh, yeah. This is so insane. This is why we need a strong, defined leader who will stand up and say, you killed 14 Americans. That has a consequence. You captured 22. We got back 5. You killed 14. You killed 14 of our people. That means you don't get humanitarian aid. That's what I would say. We are not going to spend American taxpayer money to give Hamas, the government of Gaza, the terrorists. We're not going to give you food. We're not going to give you water. We're not going to give you supplies because you killed 14 of our people over 15 months by sexual abuse and torture. Innocent civilians. They had nothing to do with this. They didn't know anything about your conflict. They had nothing. They were watching a concert. And you decided to kill them and to capture them as hostages and to kill them as hostages in human shields and held them against their will. Yeah, we have no compulsion to provide them with any support whatsoever. Congress should cut off any funding, any humanitarian funding and aid for Gaza. They get nothing. That's what I believe. Maybe you guys will disagree with me. And if you do, that's fine. But I think the Trump administration should go in and go to Congress and tell them, cut off all the funding. They get nothing. Nothing from the United States in no way, shape, or form. I'd say the same thing for the Houthis. I say the same thing for Hezbollah. Cut them off. They get nothing. They have been killing Americans. No, they get nothing. They have made it more difficult for Americans and others around the world to get food. I'm talking about the Houthis specifically. Their attacks in the Red Sea have made it more expensive and more difficult for people to get food all across the world. That is a fact. It's not a guess. It's not a maybe. It's not my opinion. That is an empirical fact. They get no aid. We don't give them food. We don't give them water. We don't give them health care. We give them nothing. That's it. It's that simple. They have been attacking. As recently as this weekend, the United States was being attacked by the Houthi government. This weekend, Saturday, the Houthis were still shooting missiles into Israel. That was Saturday. Guess what? On that same day, according to the United States Naval Institute, the seventh strike against the U.S. Truman Carrier Group was done by the Houthis. They're attacking Americans. They attacked our naval military ships, attacked us. They've attacked our vessels, our trading vessels, private, civilian ships, and our vessels. Doesn't matter if they killed our people or not. We have no reason to give them anything. I understand. Joe Biden took the Houthis, who were known international terrorists, that recognized as terrorists by the American government. And he said, no, that was Trump. Trump thought you were terrorists. And he gave them food and clothing and water and fuel. And they used it to buy weapons from Iran. And then now they're using it against us. As recently as yesterday. Cut them off. Trump should go to Congress and say they get nothing. Nothing. Because they deserve nothing. Not a single penny. Not a single penny of your taxpayer dollars should go to the Houthis, who are making food more expensive for American citizens and the rest of the world. Because the Houthis are letting people starve around the world. Yeah, cut them off. Am I the bad guy for saying that? Did I show you this? I'm sorry. I didn't look if I put this on the screen for you guys or not. So, yesterday, the Houthis continued to attack Israel, and they attacked the United States. Cut them off. It's just that simple. Joel is with us, and Joel says, Biden administration makes announcements of success for every action they make. Yes, Joe Biden just went through a list of things. He's responsible for everything being great. Everything is better than you have ever expected. Everything was perfect under the Biden administration. Kamala had a perfect campaign. Joe Biden had a perfect campaign. Inflation didn't exist. Yeah, everything he did was fantastic. I don't even know how he gets there. Joel goes on to say, they post false numbers to support their false claims, then later post a correction. Well, yes, they've been doing that for a long time. Remember that over a year of the unemployment rate and the number of unemployed American citizens, we were lied to for a year. For a year. But why are you surprised? Why should any American be surprised? Joe Biden hasn't been mentally capable of running the government since the first day in 2021. We know that now because of the White House aides. They don't have to protect him anymore. They have come out and told us. They were jury rigging the meetings of Joe Biden, hiding the fact that he is mentally impaired since January 2021. They knew they were lying to you every day. The news media knew that Joe Biden was mentally impaired, and they just didn't tell you. Are you surprised? So I'm sure Joe Biden thinks that everyone's doing great. I'm sure Joe Biden thinks the country's in much better place than reality. In Joe Biden's mentally damaged mind, I'm sure he thinks things are fantastic. They're not. No one is living like Joe Biden. No one is living in this fantasy world that Democrats have tried to sell you for the last 4 years. That's why they lost dramatically. Why did they lost in Michigan? Michigan. That just tells you how bad it was. How much reality is disconnected from the message of Democrats. I don't know. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's... And we have to be aware. Because of the Biden administration, China now has friendly ties with Iran. That's because of Joe Biden. And the Houthis, main source of money and weapons, and Chinese are coming from the Chinese. The Chinese are paying the Houthis along with Iran, and the Houthis are not, while they are attacking U.S. military vessels, while they're attacking cargo ships from everywhere in the world, and they're trying to blackmail various companies and countries to pay the Houthis about $200 million a year. As they're trying to blackmail them, China isn't paying anything. China gets through for free because China is making deals with Iran so that Iran is able to get past all the sanctions that Joe Biden let go and Trump is going to put back in place. That's what's going on. By the way, if you're wondering, how do I know that the Houthis are blackmailing every country in the world for food to allow their cargo ships of food and water and goods and energy? How do I know that? This is coming from, one second. There it is. This is from The Economist. Again, I don't need to make up these stories. The news is out there. The news media, if you're able to look for it, if you know, okay, I can't go to the New York Times, I can't look at CNN or MSNBC. They're not going to tell me the truth. ABC News doesn't want to talk about this. Well, what about the BBC? What about The Guardian? What about The Economist? What about Forbes? What about foreignpolicy.com? What about the Nippon News, the Hindustan Times? You have to know where to look. The news is out there. They're just not telling you. We have been fighting a war against the Houthi terrorists for the last year. Joe Biden has been fighting a war. Our military vessels are being shot at, and we are returning fire for a year. That is a war. Except it's never been called a war. This way, it doesn't have to go before Congress. If it had to go in front of Congress, then everyone has to say, why are we fighting a war with the Houthis? What is going on? It's because Iran wants us to fight the Houthis. Iran wants there to be, the harder it is for cargo ships and fuel to get around the world, the higher the price of oil. That means they make more money. That means they have more leverage. They're able to attack Israel better. They're able to hurt the United States more. That's why this is happening. And the Houthis have been very good at it. They're now trying to bribe the United States. And under the Biden administration, they're probably getting paid top dollar. Because the Biden administration is willing to do anything to hide from the American people how bad their policies are, how much damage their policies have done. And our ships, our military is being attacked. That is a declaration of war. Now, I know the Houthis are a terrorist organization, not a nation. We're not going to war against Yemen. We can't. There's no reason to fight the country of Yemen. But the country of Yemen is pretty corrupt and really doesn't exist. The Houthis have massive control. And it is very clear that we are fighting an organization, that's the Houthis, who are just a puppet of Iran. We need to take action. Again, that brings me back to the same thing, just like with Hamas. Same thing with Hezbollah. It comes back to Iran. We need to take action. Joe Biden said, okay, we will lift 36 different sanctions. We will release billions upon billions of dollars. And that's them being nice to Iran. And Iran said, great, and the Houthis are now going to attack you. Was that worth it? Inflation went up in the United States because of the money that we printed and paid to Iran, as well as to the Houthis, as well as to Hamas, as well as to Hezbollah. $157 million that we paid Lebanon for no reason. Did you forget? Hurricane Milton, October 2024. We had Americans who had their homes destroyed. And the Biden administration gave more money to Lebanon than to North Carolina. Oh, most people forgot that. That we gave $100 million to help North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia deal with Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene. We gave $157 million that same week to Lebanon. I don't know why. I don't know what we gave them money for. We just did. Joe Biden just gave them $157 million. I don't know why. I can't tell you what the logic is on why we, the United States, had to give. What happened that week? Remember all the beepers blew up in Lebanon? Hezbollah? All the beepers held by Hezbollah blew up. And because that happened, and because Israel was defending itself, because Hezbollah kept attacking northern Israel, because they were fighting back, the United States, Joe Biden, gave Hezbollah $157 million. That makes no sense. My God, I'm so happy that Joe Biden is no longer in power. I am so happy that we're going to have Donald Trump in office next year. And yes, to go back to the comment by Grace earlier, is there going to be more stability? Absolutely. Because we're not going to be paying all the terrorists millions, if not billions of dollars and saying, please play nice. And they don't. And so then we pay them more money. And they still don't play nice. We're not doing that anymore. That's not what the Trump administration is about. We're not going to keep giving money to terrorists who keep attacking us and just ask them, please be nice. Please don't beat up on me anymore. We're no longer in that phase. That's no longer going to happen. And just like when you confront any bully, they back down. When you confront them, they back down. They stop. And that's what Iran is doing right now. They made their deals with China. They're trying to lay down, be quiet, and hope that they aren't the focus of the Trump administration. They're trying to shut everything down. That's why Hamas decided to make the deal. Because Trump said, if you don't, we're going to step in and we're going to crush you. And I know there are friends of mine, there are people out there who in political commentary, and they say, well, it was part of a deal. Trump was negotiating. You'll see, they're going to get something for this. Yeah, they got to live. That's the deal. You get to live or you get to give us back our people. One or the other. That's the deal we made. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's me. And I look forward to hearing what anyone and everyone thinks. If you think I'm wrong about anything that I've gone over, any of the data that I am providing, and after the show is done, links to all of these sources will be available so that you can read the stories for yourself. I'm not embellishing anything. These numbers, these actions, They're in black and white, covered internationally by credible news agencies. Almost all of them left-leaning. Almost every single one. This isn't my partisan point of view. These are the facts. And I am giving you, on top of that, my consideration of what is the consequences. What have been the consequences so far, and what may be the consequences going forward. So that kind of covers where we are right now. They're lying to us about how many American hostages, about the number of hostages. We already know there was 22. We know that there are 5. 3 were released, 2 were killed by Hamas. Initially, that we know of. There are 3 left. That leaves 14. 14 Americans that are now being called by the news media Israelis, so they don't have to admit the abject, total failure of the Biden-Harris administration, how they allowed Americans to die under Biden-Harris's watch. Even as they told you at the DNC meeting for Kamala Harris, got on the stage and said, hey, guess what? This is our number one issue that they completely failed at. That they were working on this every single day, and every single day was a failure. Fine. Let me move on a little bit. I'm very upset about this. And we have been talking about this nonstop for 15 months. I don't need to make this up. You can look back every single live stream we have done for a year and a half. The data is there. We've been providing it all the time. All to make Democrats look good. But let's talk about going forward. Let's talk about what's the future. So we know that now there is a ceasefire. Hamas agreed to give back the hostages. There's a ceasefire. And Israel reconfirmed, with the help of the Trump administration, that they reconfirmed, give back the hostages, there's a ceasefire. Exactly as we always said. And I have said this week after week after week. They could have a ceasefire within 24 hours, give back the hostages. They agreed on Friday to give back actually it was Saturday, to give back the hostages. There's a deal. Done. That's it. There's a ceasefire. They made the agreement. It was 36 hours later. They have the hostages back and there's a ceasefire. It was that simple. And for all the Democratic Socialists of America, Harvard, Columbia, you guys have been barking up the wrong tree. You have been wasting time. You've been blaming everything on Israel. All you had to do was talk to Hamas. You should have reached out to Hamas. You should have put pressure on Iran and Hamas to give back the hostages, and we would have been here a year ago. It was that easy to fix. Give back the hostages. That's it. That being said, what else is going to change with the Trump administration going forward? What are we going to see after the inauguration tomorrow? There'll be a lot of pomp and there'll be a lot of circumstance. And why is it? And I know a lot of people are saying, well, Trump has no support. They're going to have the inauguration indoors because they don't have the crowds. Are you kidding? They moved it indoors, and there are people who are still swarming D.C. They have huge numbers. But you hear this in the news. You hear this on Blue Sky. Oh, well, Trump's just trying to hide the fact that he has no support. Are you kidding? You forget he won the election. He won the popular vote. They keep forgetting that. It's because they've been trying to assassinate Trump. That they've shot at Trump. Killed an American citizen doing it. That they have been trying to kill him for some time. And to be exposed outdoors is the problem. And I know, you heard the news. Oh, it's because of the weather. Are you kidding me? We've had presidents who've been inaugurations with rain. in the winter with snow. They've never stopped. The weather is not the problem. Safety is the problem because crazy progressives keep trying to kill Trump. And that's just a fact. We know that they have. Crazy leftists have been trying to kill Trump repeatedly. They keep failing. It has cost innocent civilian lives, but they keep trying because they're out of their mind. The blue sky crowd. So that's why it's going to be indoors. And we're going to have the pomp and the circumstance, and it's going to be covered by everyone. And I'm going to be talking about it with Larry Sharp tomorrow. And it's going to be a big deal, and everyone's going to go, oh my God, it looks so wonderful. Who showed up? Who didn't show up? Who's standing next to Trump? Who's not standing next to Trump? That'll be the talk. Okay. But the reality is, where does America stand? I thought this was pretty important. According to an Ipsos poll, which has been quoted right now, I believe this was Ipsos CBS poll, 55% of Americans, not Republicans, not Democrats, Americans, everybody, 55% support deporting all illegal aliens in the United States. 55% support that. 63% support getting rid of all the illegal aliens that came to America under the Biden-Harris administration. 63%. 87% of Americans, these are Democrats, these are progressives, these are libertarians and Green Party, as well as Republicans and conservatives, 87% of Americans say that if there is an illegal alien that has come into America and then committed a violent crime on top of the initial crime, they have to be deported. 87%. Mass deportations will happen. And it is rumored, it is expected that on Tuesday, the second day, first actual day of the Trump administration being in force, day one, Trump's going to go into Chicago and into New York and Boston and LA and all of the sanctuary cities at the same time. Sanctuary cities will be confronted, and illegal aliens, violent illegal aliens, will be removed to mass deportation. And that's a good thing. And I'm happy to hear that. And the overwhelming majority of Americans agree. To some varying degree, everyone agrees. The only people who don't agree are the people who voted for Kamala Harris. Not a whole lot. Probably most of them. Americans are tired of the open border policy. The border is going to be closed. It's going to be one of the first things that we see happen. And by the way, this is coming from the Ipsos poll, which is heading into Trump's second term. Americans are deeply divided. They're not deeply divided. They want you to think Americans are deeply divided. But what we see is overwhelmingly, Americans tend to agree with the policies of the Trump administration. They agree with the conservative America First MAGA principles. Overwhelmingly, almost every single one of the issues, the American people agree. Almost in the cases where we don't see agreement, like Americans are divided on their support for increasing tariffs. 46 support tariffs. 50% oppose it. That's the margin of error. 46 to 50, that's a coin toss. So that's not deep division. Almost every one of these issues is where they're saying there's deep division. It's a coin toss difference between for or against a policy from the Trump administration. Except if it's something like illegal immigration. And everyone says, we need to fix that. We need to get rid of the illegal aliens. If nothing else, we need to get rid of the violent illegal aliens. The people who are going into apartment buildings, apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, in Brooklyn, New York, throughout LA, and in Portland and Seattle. We need to get rid of them. They need to be deported for the safety of the American people. Going back to the question I was asked earlier by Grace, will there be more stability? Yes. Because mass deportation, we didn't ask these people to be in America. And the fact that they're being violent criminals in America, absolutely, we don't need them here. Send them back. Send them back to their country, whatever country that might be. And it's not just Mexico. My God, how the left wants you to think it's only Mexico. They're all brown. Oh my God, they're only brown people. Sorry, there are people from everywhere in the world coming to America. Because the leftists may not understand it, but America is the best place in the world. Everyone from every country is trying to get here because it's the best. And the left may think, oh, well, it's so terrible. They won't leave. Notice, as much as you hear all these college professors, all these leftists, these progressives, they're like, oh, America's so terrible. It's such an evil, horrible place. They won't leave. There's nowhere for them to go. It doesn't get better than America, and they know it. So they're busy trying to say, you should feel guilty for being an American, how terrible you are. But they won't leave. And everyone's coming here. But guess what? Come here legally. I don't think that's too much to ask for. And if you can't come here legally, if you do show up illegally, at least have the grace to not commit more crimes, especially violent crimes. Don't do that. If for some reason, somehow you get into this nation illegally, then just thank God for you making it here and having a higher quality of life. Even if you're poor, you're going to have a higher quality of life in America than wherever you left. And they know that. That's why they left. That's why they left whatever country they were in. They know they weren't safe. They weren't going to have the same quality of life. And to be a second-class citizen in America is still better than to be in Angola or Honduras or Venezuela, Laos, China. Still better to be here in the United States. But they're going to try and tell you that absolutely, the American people aren't with that. The American people don't support Donald Trump. They don't support anything that he's been doing. And they're going to try and convince you that, oh, you know what? Thousands of women gathered in Washington, and they are protesting. They're protesting right now. They've been protesting, and they don't agree with Donald Trump. This is according to Reuters. Thousands. Except it really isn't that much. More people were buying into the lie that Donald Trump women are going to lose all of their rights. They won't be able to vote. They're not going to have any rights whatsoever. They're going to be in the kitchens. Well, people believed that in 2017. And there were tens of thousands of women who came out and marched ahead of the 2017 inauguration. That's fact. And far less did so now because they saw the difference. They saw the reality. Oh, women didn't lose all their rights. They were promised that. You were told that. 2016, you were told, Donald Trump wins, you're going to lose all your rights. No one lost their rights. Black people would be in chains. None of them were in chains. Slavery would be back. It's not. The KKK would take over. They didn't. They lied to you. They were fear-mongering you. They were using your emotions and the fear that they were pumping into you to try and make you think something was going to happen. Didn't happen. Never happened. And then they're doing it again, except more people now understand the truth and know that's not real. That's just fear-mongering to get votes and for Democrats to raise money, kind of like they did with the LA fires, the wildfires in Hollywood. What do? Oh my God, there's a fire. You should help. Go to Act Blue, a Democrat fundraising app. Give them your money so that Democrats would have money. Because and then Act Blue, which is not a charity, is not tax deductible. Give them your money so they can give it to the United Way of LA. Rather than give to a charity directly, Gavin Newsom, Elizabeth Warren, the left are telling you, no, go to Act Blue. Give the money to Democrats so that Democrats will have more money, more power, more ability to get reelected. And then they'll eventually get the money over to, all those needy people in Hollywood, all those needy people in California who had their home burned down. I'm not talking about the celebrities. I'm talking about everyone else. All the working class people in those neighborhoods, they lost their homes and everything. And rather than give them money immediately, Democrats are saying, help Democrats win. Give the money to the Democrat Super Fund. And now they're telling you, oh, no. Women hate Trump. That's why they're protesting. Huge numbers. They're all over. They're having going to National Mall and the Lincoln Memorial, and they are just filling it up, except not really. No, these are the smallest numbers because no one wants to. They voted for Trump. The overwhelming majority believe Trump is the right direction. Again, 61% of the nation believe that the Biden-Harris progressive ideology is the wrong track for America. But they're going to try and lie to you every way they can. They're going to try and tell you, the People's March, they were women, thousands of women are marching. It is smaller than the number that came out the first time when we had no idea what to expect from Trump. Way, way less, but they're still going out there. And there's still doom. They're still telling you, oh no, here's going to be doom. We're going to lose all our rights. Women are suddenly going to lose the right for an abortion. It's suddenly going to disappear. Trump's never said that he's going to take it away. It's a state decision. That decision was already made under the Biden-Harris administration. Had nothing to do with Trump. Oh, but Trump's going to take away abortion. No, he's not. He's not even capable of doing it. It's in the states. It's a state decision, not the federal government. He has no power over it. He can't take it away from you. Oh, but you just don't understand. Trump hates women. No, he doesn't. That's just hype. I don't know, man. I look at all of this stuff over and over again, and it's just incredible. How about this? This is from The Guardian. I want you to see how they are hyping you up and lying to your face to take advantage of you. This is from The Guardian. This was today, Sunday. An information age is a dark age is upon us. These are the dark days. Oh my God, Trump's in charge. It's the end of the world. Does this sound like 2016, 2017 to you? The world is going to end. Donald Trump's in charge and everyone's going to lose their rights. All the freedoms in the world are going to end because Donald Trump. Does this sound like 2016, 2017? Does this sound like what they said in 2020? So this guy, Stuart Lee, it's Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. They're all part of it. They're working with Trump. And you have nothing. Really? Jeff Bezos is a Democrat and exclusively gives hundreds of millions of dollars to Democrats. Mark Zuckerberg, well, he's an opportunist. He'll go wherever is the best opportunity, but he donates to Democrats and has been voting to Democrats for a long time. Elon Musk is also an opportunist. Give you that. But the opportunities, Elon Musk tried to be a Democrat. They kicked him out. So then he went to the Republicans. It's just that simple. but listen to the way they talk to you. Wow, that escalated quickly. This is what he must say. This has escalated. Since the election, it's escalated. Last time that he filed his supposedly funny column, it's not funny. He's not funny. Only 2 weeks ago, Los Angeles wasn't on fire. That's because of Democrat policies. That's because of the progressive policies of Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass. Got nothing to do with Democrats, got nothing to do with Republicans whatsoever, or Donald Trump. 2 weeks ago, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg hadn't abandoned the guardrails that restricted neo-fascist lies. Oh my God, really? The fact checkers, which Mark Zuckerberg admits were biased and were censoring people. That's what you wanted? This is what the Guardian's talking about? Oh my God, they're not censoring people anymore. How could they do that? You have to censor people. He's upset. Mark Zuckerberg is no longer going to censor people, which he said directly. That's what the fact checkers were doing, suppressing and censoring people, because that's what the White House wanted. That's what Joe Biden and the Democrats in office wanted to do, to censor the public. And he's saying that not doing that is fascist. It's fascist not to allow the government to censor your voice. He's out of his mind. This is coming from The Guardian. Or, quote, free speech as they now know. It's now known as free speech to not censor people. Well, yes, not censoring people is free speech. I understand he's maybe from England. He may not understand the First Amendment. But the government doesn't have the right in America to censor what people say. The government doesn't have the right to mandate the words that people use. That's not what the American government has the power to do. And he's upset that the American government isn't censoring people, isn't mandating the way people speak, mandating the way people think. This is from The Guardian. He goes on to say, the U.S. hadn't, in the last 2 weeks, the U.S. hadn't threatened to invade Canada and England. We didn't. The news media asked Donald Trump if he was planning to invade. Trump said, no, not really. And they said he was considering invading. He was considering to buy land and, more importantly, buy the rights in Greenland. I covered this. I did an entire video on this. I was talking about it last week. Donald Trump, like in 2019, Donald Trump did the same thing last week as he did in 2019. In 2019, the media didn't care. They were too busy trying to tell you that Donald Trump was going to start a war with North Korea. He didn't. In fact, we had some of the best national relations with North Korea since the Korean War with Donald Trump. But they were trying to turn that into, it's World War III. Aren't you terrified? Vote Democrat. Wasn't true. It was a lie. And he's trying to say, well, Trump was going to invade Greenland. That was the media who said that. That was the media's question, not Donald Trump. And guess what? It's not true. It's not a fear. Trump isn't trying to take over Canada either. That comes from the left. That's from the left-leaning news media. Left-leaning politicians have said that. They keep saying it, and they keep saying, well, it's got to be true because a politician said it, so got to be true. Even though those very same politicians lie to you on a regular basis, these news organizations lie to you on a basis. They still think that Joe Biden is sharp as a tack, that he's mentally intact, and the world knows that's a lie. They go on, Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson hadn't declared the sniff-conked, I don't know what that means. That's got to be a British thing. Sniff-conked sunbed fraudster Tommy Robinson is the new Nelson Mandela. He's also been right. Tommy Robinson has been right about a lot. And you don't have to like Jordan Peterson or Elon Musk. Doesn't mean they're wrong. And the next U.S. president, Donald Trump, though already an educated sexual abuser, wasn't actually a convicted felon. He got charged 34 times for the same non-felony. 34 times, which no one believes was correct. He got charged with 34 felonies for something that really isn't even a misdemeanor. And then he was proven guilty because he was already convicted guilty. He was accused by New York State and said he's guilty, and we're going to make up 34 charges so that we can guarantee he's guilty. I'm sorry, no. And Trump isn't a sexual abuser. That's not what he got convicted of. But he goes on. Wasn't actually a convicted felon who would have been in prison if he were not in the White House. He would have been in prison because of the abuse of the legal system. That doesn't make it just. Yes, he might have been, if he had lost, he might have gone to prison. That doesn't make it just or correct or right. And it doesn't make the other side better. That's just an abuse of the system. So he's trying to tell us, oh my God, you will never have the power. He's like, oh my God, the internet will never be the same. I hope not. Did he not read? Did no one at The Guardian notice when we saw the Twitter files, when we got confirmed proof over and over again that the White House, that Democrats, the DNC were all capitulating to control what people were able to hear and see and say, that the news media was commanded to lie to the American public and the global public on a regular basis? Did he somehow not recognize that The Guardian was part of that system of control, of lies and abuse? And he wants you to accept it. He's saying it's the dark ages because we now will get more transparency, just like we did under the first term of Donald Trump. Because social media will have less restrictions than they have right now. And he thinks that's a bad thing. This is insane. This is insane. Just sit back and think about these things, folks. It's incredible. I'll move forward. Let's talk about Joe Biden for a second. Joe Biden has come out in the last couple of days, and Joe Biden has been trying to find something that he can say about his administration that will get him into the history books as a positive. He's been lying and cajoling and saying, the economy is fantastic. No, it's not. Objectively, empirically, no, it's not. The American people loved him. No, they don't. That's empirically not correct. You know what? He was able to help get the hostages home. No, he did not. Oh, but what happened with Afghanistan? It wasn't that bad. A complete, utter disgrace for the American military. So he's trying to come up with every story he can, trying to somehow flip this so that in the history books, he will get an accomplishment, that he will have some kind of success next to his name. He's not. There isn't one. Doesn't exist. So his latest thing, which not only is an attempt to get him, and I truly believe this, I think someone on Biden's team is intelligent. They told Joe Biden, you know what? Say the 28th Amendment exists. It doesn't, but say it. Just say it. Just say that the 28th Amendment exists. For those of you who don't know, America only has 27 amendments, not 28. There is no 28th Amendment. The 28th Amendment, the proposal was the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment. This was for women. And literally, it degrades women. The ERA is horrible. It means that women are not capable of doing anything on their own. They need the government to protect them. It's just as dehumanizing as affirmative action or DEI. That's very dehumanizing. It means you are not capable of doing something to improve your own life on your own. You need the government to come in and to cradle you, to coddle you throughout your entire life. You couldn't get that job if it weren't for the government because you're just not good enough. You're not a human being. You are subhuman. That's what the ERA, that's what the Equal Rights Amendment says. That's what affirmative action says. That's what DEI and intersectionality say. You are subhuman and incapable of doing anything without the government stepping in for you. That's it. But no one likes to talk about that because, Democrats don't like that. Why would you tell people the truth? Why would you let them know that we are dehumanizing them? That they are merely servants, tools. But Joe Biden says, okay, the 28th Amendment, Equal Rights Amendment, this is great. Joe Biden gets to have a positive message in history. The history books will go down as Joe Biden brought in the 28th Amendment. Yay! He brought that. He's a champion for women. Yeah. He's in the history books with a positive message. Not enough to cover up all the things he screwed up, but it's still a positive. He's still in the history books for something good. And if the left is still in control of the Department of Education, it'll be the only thing they talk about. They won't talk about what happened in, excuse me. They won't talk about Afghanistan. They won't talk about inflation. They won't talk about Gaza. They won't talk about the Sudan. They won't talk about anything except, well, Joe Biden was the guy who got the 28th Amendment done. He's a hero to women. That will be the only thing that you will hear in the future coming from colleges and high schools. And that's what Joe Biden wants. Now, his staff and the DNC, the members of the Democratic Party, they want Joe Biden to say this so that women will get excited. All of the women, the National Organization of Women, otherwise known as NOW, all the female progressives that graduated from Harvard and Columbia and all the schools, they'll all think, yes, we win, we've won. We're now less than human and the government will step in and micromanage all of their lives. They won. Yay, socialism. Except it isn't true. And so when Donald Trump says, that's not real, that didn't happen, that is a lie. He is lying to you again. He lied on the first day that Joe Biden got sworn in, and he's lying on to you at the end of his presidency. He started with lies and he's ending with lies. And then the DNC, guaranteed, Democrats will come out and say, see, it is the evil Trump. He hates women. We always told you Trump hated women. Didn't you know that Republicans and Donald Trump and MAGA don't like women? They hate women because the 28th Amendment, it's not real. It didn't exist. Except there is no 28th Amendment. It doesn't exist. The 28th Amendment expired back in the 1980s. 1982, the ERA expired. It was done. There is no ERA. There is no 28th Amendment. By the way, they said, well, 38 states have ratified it in the last 50 years. Well, that's not exact. Actually, 45 years, maybe more accurate. 45 years. In the last 45 years, 38 states have ratified it. And 6 of those 38 have changed their mind. And they de-ratified it. So there's still only 32 states. So there's so many ways to look at this. Oh, they changed their mind. But, college professors who want to see the feminization, women's politics, college professors are like, oh, no. You can't change your mind. Yes, you can. States get to change their mind. They're not locked in. And 6 of them changed their mind. So it's not 38, it's 32. 32, not 38. But even if you want to go with that, let's say it's no. Let's say no state has changed its mind, even though 6 of them already have. Let's assume that didn't happen. This expired in 1982. This is 2024. Doesn't count. Doesn't exist. It would take an act of Congress to change the terms. Congress came up with the terms and said, you've got 7 years to pass this. It didn't pass. The states did not agree. 7 years. By 1982, the nation did not agree with the ERA. We believed that women were capable. They had agency. They were able to make decisions for themselves. They didn't need the government to control every aspect of their lives. So we didn't pass the 28th Amendment. It was unnecessary. And women have become CEOs of major companies, high-end leadership of these countries. Like Kathleen Kennedy is a great example over at Disney. Untouchable. You can't fire her even if you wanted to, no matter how much money she loses for Disney. Untouchable. You've got Kamala Harris as vice president. Oh my goodness. Women, how could they? They couldn't possibly succeed on their own. And yet, how many women? About, I believe it's 18% of Congress are women. So, yeah, but women have no success whatsoever. They can't succeed anywhere. But they are. They are succeeding. They are owning mega companies. They are one of the first billionaires in entertainment, Oprah Winfrey. Oh, yes, women have done it. Black women have done it. Asian women, Hispanic women have been mega successes without the ERA. So why did they do this? To lie to you. To have so that they could run with the story, and you will see this for the midterm elections. You're going to see in 2026, they're going to come out with story after story. Donald Trump killed the 28th Amendment. No, it was already dead. Donald Trump opposed the 28th Amendment. It didn't exist. Donald Trump hates women, and we told you Donald Trump hates women, and now this is proof. Donald Trump hates women because he's not supporting the 28th Amendment. It doesn't exist. This is the government lying to you. Going back to the social media. Oh my goodness. The government is again lying. And we have seen that the Biden-Harris administration started lying to you day one and have been continuously lying every day all the way for 4 years. This is a setup. And they're going to use women. College-educated single women are going to come out and they're going to scream and shout and say, it's the 28th Amendment. It has to be there. The government has to give me more money. The government has to support me. The government has to micromanage my life. Because that's what the ERA does. Takes away all of their agency. And they're going to support that because it's an amendment. It must be good. They are a special class of American citizen and they will be treated special, like special ed, special education. They want the short bus, the government-funded short bus, and they're going to get it one way or the other, except they can't. This was a setup. And Joe Biden is mentally disabled, so I believe he didn't understand the consequences of what he said. It's the law. No, it's not. No, it's not. I want to get to the comments in just 1 second, but excuse me. Here's the really scary part about this, though. The part that no one really wants to talk about. What if suddenly the 28th Amendment suddenly became law? What if the government actually went with this? What if Donald Trump went with this? Okay, fine. It's 28th Amendment. It exists. It's been ratified. It expired. It's past due. It's not real. But you know what? We're going to pass it anyway. Because Joe Biden, a president, said so. Do you know how much power that gives the president? That turns America into a dictatorship. Oh my God. None of the left thought about this. If a president can declare whether a law exists or not, If a president gets to change the Constitution on their own at a whim, that's going to destroy America. That turns America into a dictatorship. Any president could suddenly turn off or on any amendment at any given time just because they said it's a law. Doesn't matter that the process doesn't exist. Doesn't matter if it didn't actually constitutionally follow the steps. They can just turn on and off the power of the government. That's a dictatorship. That's what they're asking you to believe in. They want women to not only give up their rights, they want to give more power than has ever been seen in the hands of the President of the United States. And if you think I'm wrong, let another Democrat in and say that, assume that the 28th Amendment is real, and then let another Democrat in. And I guarantee you he's going to make up his own laws again. Why? The precedent has been set. Joe Biden did it. Joe Biden said it's real. Not an act of Congress, which is the way it's supposed to happen. Not something that was gone through the Senate, not because it was confirmed by the Supreme Court of the United States. It's because Joe Biden said so. He's president. He says it's real. He says it's law. Change the books. Change the history books. Not real. Not true. You're giving too much power to someone who doesn't have that power. You are literally destroying the foundation of checks and balances in the United States. Oh, but you weren't thinking about that, were you? When you were screaming that Donald Trump hates women and the 28th Amendment proves it, you weren't thinking about the fact that you're giving ultimate power to the president. That this is a lie. And mind you, Joe Biden doesn't care. Joe Biden absolutely does not care. This isn't about Joe Biden, about Donald Trump. He doesn't care. Because the very thing that Joe Biden is trying to tell you, that, oh my God, we've now had enough states, 38 states have now, as of 2020, 38 states ratified the 28th Amendment. That means in 2020, if that could have been done, if we could have made the 28th Amendment a law, it would have happened in 2020. Or more importantly, the first day that Biden was in office. Not the last day, the first day. If he cared about women, he would have made the ERA real day one. This is how little Joe Biden cares about women. This is about Joe Biden's place in history. This is about screwing around with Donald Trump. It's about giving Democrats a way to attack Trump and to try and justify the promise by Democrats that Donald Trump hates women, that MAGA hates women. This is nothing but pure politics. This is propaganda at the maximum level. I mean, seriously, if it wasn't, why did Joe Biden wait all 4 years? Why did he wait until the very last second of the very last day to say, oh, yeah, an ERA exists? Throwing it at Trump, making Trump's problem. It's true. It's a law. Now that I'm no longer in charge, now that I don't have to deal with it anymore, now that Trump has to deal with it, because Trump's going to say, no, it's not, because it absolutely, legally is not a law. Oh, well, see, Trump hates women. Go vote Democrat. Let me see here. Let me go through some of the comments. Because I want to see, does anyone disagree with me? Joel says, Kirsten Gillibrand is echoing that same BS about the ERA being an amendment now. She's a lawyer. She knows better. Half of Congress are lawyers. They know better. They are lying to your face. And they're doing it because power. They get to say, Trump hates women. That's what just like they wanted to say, Trump's a criminal. They wanted the headline. Didn't matter how they got there. They just wanted that headline. They just want to say Trump hates women. They don't care how they get that headline. They don't care if it's not real. They don't care if they have to lie to you. You're not supposed to be paying attention. You didn't know that the ERA amendment expired in 1982, long before most of the people, most of the voters today were even alive. They think, oh, you're never going to check on that. You're never going to pay attention. And the news media certainly isn't going to bring it up. So, Joe, yeah, you're right. So, Kirsten Gillibrand, gee, why would she jump on that bandwagon? Because she's a female politician who wants more power? This is a way for her to try and get reelected because AOC wants to take Kirsten Gillibrand out. AOC wants to replace Gillibrand as senator so she can then run for the presidency and say she has Senate credentials, that she's actually served in the Senate. Increases her chances of winning. That's why. And so Gillibrand needs something because she's done nothing. She has nothing of any significance behind her name. And she already lost her run for her run for president. Embarrassingly, she lied to the people of New York, looked them dead in the face and said, I will not run in 2018, said, I will not run for the presidency of the United States. If she was elected senator, she would never run. That's what she said to the American people. She won. She was reelected, and literally in November of 2018, she turned around, November, December, right there. She turned around and said, oh, by the way, I'm running for president of the United States. What? Didn't you just promise? You went on TV. You made the promise to all of New York. Said, I'm not going to run. I wouldn't do that to you. Turned around, she ran, lied to your face. Yeah, she just wants power. So, I'm no fan of Kirsten Gillibrand. She lies as much as Biden does. User has been banned, says. And thank you for joining us, user. User says, I thought the 28th was service equals citizenship. I love that joke. You're funny. I love that. If people don't know what you're referencing there, service equals citizenship. Well, that would be Starfleet Troopers. Philip K. Dick. Great book. Good movie. Better than what what the creator thought. Well, that's another thing altogether. That's a critique of the movie, but yeah, pretty funny. I like that. I'm not necessarily against the idea of service equals citizenship. I'm not necessarily against that. I thought Philip K. Dick was onto something with that. He makes a very good argument for it. No matter how comically the left wants you to think about that, they want it to be satirical because if you thought about it, you might take it seriously because it's got merit to the idea. They don't want you to think about that because then they would lose power. They don't want you to be in that mindset because they lose their position of power if that's the case. So there's that. Joel says, I think 20 years from now, Biden will be remembered for cognitive decline. What else could he be remembered for? There's nothing else. He has no success. There is no benefit. There is nothing that Biden did that benefited this nation. I'm more than happy to hear from anyone on the left to tell me, Mike, you forgot about this. What policy did Joe Biden put forward that passed that was actually beneficial to the American people? There isn't one. Nothing he did helped. Not internationally, not domestically. Let's see here. Dow says, it is why the people must actively be involved in their own governance to retain the power as citizens rather than be subjugated. Well, I agree. I agree with you there. This is all about subjugating people. This is about a lie. And the lie is meant to abuse Trump and to use you. Now, we did talk about this earlier, that the 14th Amendment is on the, actually, where did I put this? 1 second. No, that's not it. I had one thing I wanted to go over, which I thought was pretty. Here it is. Random. So, what can we expect from Trump on his first day? We've already seen the world has changed. We already see the world is becoming safer. We see that the world is becoming more stable. Terrorism is decreasing before our eyes. This is a fact. This is a reality. We are seeing it demonstrably. We see that Democrats are scrambling for anything that they can say Trump is bad. Anything that they can throw at Trump and try and make you believe things are going to be worse than they actually are. That's not working, but they're trying. They're trying their best to sabotage him as we speak. And one of the things is Donald Trump has made several promises about what he will do within the first day, if not the first week, of being president. Several of these things are executive orders. What executive orders can we expect from Donald Trump? Well, one of the first things that he said he would do within the first 100 days, if not the first day. Right now, everyone's screaming about TikTok, TikTok. TikTok was banned and now it's not banned and Trump's kind of for it even though he was against it. I don't care. I don't think that's the big issue. That doesn't change the world. Whether there is or isn't a TikTok in America, really not a factor. Yes, I have a TikTok. I broke down finally and said, okay, I started a TikTok and I reached some people there. It's not my platform. It's basically another Blue Sky. A little bit better. A little better than Blue Sky. But it's owned by the Chinese communists and it's highly, highly suppressed. Would Elon buy it? Maybe. Would it be better if he did? Probably. There would be less censorship than already exists there. But I don't think that's really the big deal. That's not a big deal. I understand there's people who make a living on TikTok. They want it to exist because they want their money. So I can't fault them for that. But I don't think it's the biggest news in America, whether there is or is not a TikTok, quite honestly. Going on, immigration. Immigration, as we said earlier, one of the first things that we see is that there will be a mass deportation. We will see a crackdown in Chicago, in New York, in LA, in all of the sanctuary cities across America will be, if not, it is expected immediately within the first week, to some degree, they are all going to have their illegal aliens, violent illegal aliens, deported. I'm all for it. We will net save money deporting these violent illegal aliens. They cost money. I mean, think about it. In New York alone, $73,000 a year are spent on illegal aliens, including illegal aliens that are violent criminals, to give them a house and to give them food, not including extra money that we give them just to live. $73,000, twice, double the average American's income. Let's get rid of some of these people. We will lower the amount. That will lower the amount of spending by New York State and New York City, and therefore the national debt. It will reduce the money that we are wasting on people we did not ask to be in this country and who are too stupid to be in the country and take advantage of it, take advantage of being here. Nope, they had to commit crimes too. Well, get rid of them. I don't see a problem with that. So that's happening, and the border will close. That's going to happen pretty fast. So I think that's real. Donald Trump also promised or has said, he has talked about, I think is the best way to word that. Forbes is saying he vowed. I don't think it was a vow. He said he wants this. He wants to talk about it at the very least, that he wants to change the 14th Amendment. We've already covered that on this channel. We've already covered the 14th Amendment. We've already had that discussion that you can change the 14th Amendment very simply, just adding about 2 or 3 words, and it would not change It would not suddenly put black people in chains. It would not affect people who've already been are already American citizens. It would just stop illegal aliens. That's it. We could do this, and I think we should. I think birthright should be for American citizens, not for people taking advantage of Americans. So we may see that. I don't think that's going to be on the first day, since it is dealing with a amendment. You will see this be a discussion in Congress. Do I think that Donald Trump in the first day or two will bring this up as a topic for the Congress to address? Yes, I do. I think within the first 100 days, he will have Congress contemplate this. Will it not, whether or not it changes? No, because that's not something you can do with an executive order. Immigration, sending out Department of Justice, sending out State Department, sending out the agencies of the United States to enforce the law is in the power of the president. Can be done by an executive order, an executive memo, and just the president demanding that it happens. That's in the power of the presidency. That exists. That's constitutional. Giving TikTok more time is something that the president can do. That is within the power of the presidency. Changing the 14th Amendment isn't. So that's not going to happen overnight. Tariffs. President has that right, along with the Senate, to be able to put tariffs out there and to change the nature of tariffs that exist. Is that something I think Donald Trump's going to float to the Senate day one, day two? Yes. Will that be positive for America? Long term? Yes. I absolutely think so. Long term, it will be a benefit. Why? It will force more people to buy American because it will be cheaper. And that is one of the goals of the Trump administration, to increase the amount of things made in America and bought in America. It's good for our economy. It will help employ people. It is good to have a self-sufficient country. So the tariffs will help America become more self-sufficient. It won't be pleasant for everyone. Not everyone's going to like that, but it does help America long term. I think you will see that the tariffs will go into effect, especially against China. Climate change. Trump has vowed that he's going to end the Paris climate agreements. Yes. And I hope he does. And I wish him much success in that. The United States already is the leading country in the world in reducing global greenhouse gases. Absolutely. India, China, and all of Africa exceed all of the reductions that the United States has ever made. That's it. So it doesn't matter. If you're worried about climate change, you need to go and protest India and China and most of the countries in Africa. That's where you need to be. You need to be going in front of the Chinese embassy, in front of the Indian embassy, and protesting them. You need to go to China and protest Chairman Xi. Good luck with that. Because it's not the United States. We're not the problem. We're the solution. We have more effectively reduced greenhouse gases than any country in the world. We don't need the Paris Climate Agreement. We don't need to be part of that organization. We already do more than every country in the world. In fact, more than all of Europe combined. More than all of Europe and England combined by 3 times. We don't need the Paris Accord. We're already doing what the Paris Accord is asking for. It's every other country in the world. They're the ones you need to talk to. When Europe catches up to where the United States is in reducing greenhouse gases, maybe we want to talk to the Paris Accord, but it still won't matter because China pollutes more by itself than all of Europe combined in amount they reduce. Same thing for India. Same thing for most of Africa's nations. This is a waste of time. We don't need to be in the Paris Climate Agreement. Don't need it. It is completely useless because we're the example. We don't need to prove anything to anyone. We've already done it. Electric vehicles. Can Trump, day one, put out executive order to stop the mandate on electric vehicles. I don't think so. That would be an act of Congress, I believe. So Trump can de-incentivize it as president by executing the law. He can de-emphasize the importance of the Trump administration. He can recommend for Congress to change the subsidies that are being given out because Congress has the purse. So that's something that Congress is mandating, funding these mandates. They can end that, and I think they should. I think electric vehicles are far too dangerous. I mean, just look up and ask your state, your country, whatever state you're in. Ask the state, the fire department, what are the procedures about a electric vehicle fire? Like, most people are unaware that once a cell in the battery of an electric vehicle, once it breaks, once it starts to burn, that entire vehicle will go up in flames. Every single one of those cells, those batteries, will go up in flames. Every cell will eventually break and burst into flame. Even if the initial flames go out, if there are still cells left in that electric vehicle, in any of the batteries, then it will again burst into flame eventually, because the chemical process starts. Once it starts, it will not finish until all of the batteries have burst into flame. That is a fact. It is a fact that if you ask your state, they will tell you, their fire departments will reveal that if you are in an electric vehicle and it catches fire, if you are not out of that vehicle in the first 15 seconds, you are dead. That's it. They're not going to find you. They can't save you. You're going to be cremated in that vehicle. You have 15 seconds to get out of the vehicle because the temperature of the flames are that high. At this moment, those are death traps. If you are stuck in an electric vehicle and it starts burning, you are going to die unless you can get out in 15 seconds. That's your time limit. That's the time that any fire department, that's the time limit they have to save your life. 15 seconds. This is what I am being told by volunteer firefighters in New York State based on their training from New York State. We have too much of an emphasis on electric vehicles. They are not safe enough yet. Let's see. Energy. Oil. Drill. Drill, baby, drill. I don't think we need to say anything there. We know Trump's going to change the policies. And more importantly, he's going to open up all of the leases. Not like Biden, who says, oh, yeah, you can drill. Can you drill for oil? Yes. How do you get there? Well, that you don't have a lease for. You don't have a lease to go find the oil. You don't have a lease to transport the oil from wherever you found it to the pipelines so that it can get refined. Yeah, he trapped everyone. No, you're going to see all of those licenses are going to be released by the Trump administration. Education. Trump wants to get rid of the Department of Education. I truly believe so. And I think that you will see the Department of Government Efficiency, that's Elon Musk, that's Vivek Ramaswamy. I think they're going to come in with a recommendation to shut down the Department of Education. That's a good thing. Return education to the states, because the Department of Education has failed. If its purpose was to create more educated, better educated students, they have failed. Our students now are laughingstocks. We have dropped around the world, and we spend some of the most money. New York State spends more money per student than any state in the nation. I believe it's $26,000 per student, and our students are failing at everything. The Department of Education has failed. The Department of Education is more happy to try and teach you about DEI and to enforce DEI than to teach you how to cook. This is crazy. Kids are so dependent nowadays on things like Factor and all those delivery services like Uber Eats, they can't cook. What's the point of education if you can't cook? When the day you graduate, you can't sew your clothes, you can't cook a meal, you can't survive. We have failed our kids. Get rid of the Department of Education. I know I'm running through this list really quick, but that's all right. My voice is going. All right. January 6th, pardons. Should everyone who did not commit a violent crime on January 6th, 2021, should they be pardoned? Yes. Why? Because if it were any other administration, if this happened at any other time, if they were Democrats, if they were protesting for the left, they would never have gone to prison as long as they have. This is an abuse of power. This is meant to chill people's free speech. Anyone who did not verifiably, on video, did not commit an act of violence should be pardoned, period. If we do not have video, and we know there are 40,000 hours of video on January 6, 2021. We know that for a fact. We know that we have seen at least 4,000 hours of it. If any of those individuals have not committed an act of violence, pardon them. If they committed an act of violence, charge them with their act of violence. But this was not an overthrow of the government. It wasn't insurrection, which is why people aren't being charged with insurrection. They're being charged with trespassing. Trespassing doesn't mean you go to jail for 5 years of your life. That is an abuse of power. So, no, they all need to be, if they have not committed an act of violence, they need to be pardoned. And I'd love to hear someone's argument about why, if they didn't commit an act of violence, why they need to be in jail for 5 years for trespassing. By the way, do you remember how many people in New York State alone, in New York City alone, were charged with arson and second-degree rioting, which is a violent crime, and how many of them were absolved and just had the charges dropped by New York State? 6,000. 6,000 New York State residents, citizens, were arrested and charged with rioting in the second degree and or acts of violence, and all their charges were dropped. And you want to tell me that January 6th was a problem? I'm sorry, no. Let's see. Trump's going to also... What is this? Oh, Joel said, Dow says, fire suppression of chemical fires from battery materials is imperfect because the mechanism of suppressing fuel, oxygen, and heat is imperfect and unable to effectively render the process by which it combusts inert. Yes, you can't put out, once a battery fire in an electric vehicle starts, you can't put it out. You can't use water. You can't use foam. Nothing will stop it from burning. We have nothing to stop the fire, which is why they're so dangerous. Because once it starts burning, it will keep burning until all of the battery cells are burned out. That's New York State. That's not just me. That's New York State fire regulations. This is a fact. This is what they're trained on. Dow also says, I would also say that that those taken in for January 6th who have had their due process violated should also be pardoned. Well, yes. If you haven't been, there are, I believe, at this moment, there are some 600 people who have been jailed. They've been accused, arrested, and are in jail awaiting trial. Yes, 600 out of 1,400 who were initially arrested by the FBI. There are 600 still waiting for a trial. Let them go. Let them go. Unless you have video evidence of them committing acts of violence, let them go. They've already, whatever they might have done in trespassing, they've already served time. Let them go. Yes, I would agree. Pardon them as well. Returning to the first, these are the first 100 days. This is what you can expect from Trump. So far, pretty much everything he's promised can be done, although some of it requires Congress to be committed. But let's go on. No tax on tips. Trump can't do it by himself. Again, act of Congress is required for that, but he can ask Congress to remove the taxes on tips. Absolutely. Federal workforce, fire people who don't do their job. Absolutely. He can do this, and he should do this. If you can't do your job, get fired. Part of the problem with why our government is so corrupt and so inept is because we have people who, once they get into the government union, once they're working for the government at the city, state, federal level, they know they can't get fired. I mean, that's one of the jokes. You get a job, you're working for the government, can't get fired. You will never get fired no matter what you do. There are members of Antifa in Binghamton, New York, in Broome County. I know for a fact, individuals, I can't mention his name because if I did, he'll sue me, but an individual whose name starts with the letter M, who is a New York State employee, and he's a member of Antifa. And he regularly puts out and organizes protests that he gets arrested for on a regular basis. He's still a New York State employee. He can't get fired. Even though he's been arrested multiple times for committing crimes, arrested, and he admits his guilt. He's often been arrested for second degree rioting multiple times and assault several times. He can't get fired. He's working for the state. And he's an advocate for anarchy and overthrowing of the government. Yeah, we need to fire these people. We really do. So, can Trump do that? Yes. Should Trump do that? Yes. Would that be an executive order? Absolutely. Technology, which we've been talking about a little bit. Trump is removing censorship that the Biden-Harris administration put in place. It's the Biden-Harris administration that was talking to Facebook and Twitter and all social media and demanding that they censor people, kick people off their platforms, delete their comments. Trump never did that. Trump has never been accused of doing that. He's been doing the exact opposite. So do I think Trump will be a benefit for technology? Yes. Will there be more freedom of speech? Yes. Will there be less censorship? Yes. Will the government, and specifically the White House, will they reduce the amount of control over social media that the White House currently has? Yes. So there is that. Fishing rights, I don't know enough about that one to comment on it, to be fair. I just don't know about that topic. I don't follow fishing that much. And I believe it's commercial fishing, but I don't know enough about that topic. I don't mislead you guys. When I know something, I talk about it. And I know a lot of things. And I follow a lot of issues. Fishing rights is not one of them. So I can't speak to that. And of course, overturning various Biden executive orders. Absolutely. And this is something every president does. When we see a change from one party to another party, not one, one president's a Democrat and the next president is also a Democrat, they don't change policies. But if you go from Democrat to Republican or Republican to Democrat, every time there are a series of executive orders to reverse the executive orders of the guy before him. So, Obama changed the executive orders of Bush, G.W. Bush. Trump did that to Obama, and Biden did it to Trump. Now, how excessive is it? It was very excessive. Over 41 executive orders were put in place to overturn and change around the policies of the of the Trump administration by Joe Biden. Do I think Trump will have 41 or more executive orders within his first day? I don't think so. Biden did. He had 41. I think you could see Trump come out with 15, probably about 15 executive orders on his first day. And 3 or 4 suggestions on changes to like tax law and maybe changing the 14th Amendment that you will see Trump push out there to Congress because he can't make those changes. Also, the electric vehicles, ending the mandates, that will be pushed out to Congress. So you'll have like a good 4 or 5 suggestions for policy for Congress to take up, bill proposals that will come from the White House that will go to the Congress. Yes, within the first day, within the first 48 hours, I'd expect 5 of them. And I would expect that Trump will sign 15 executive orders, which are in line with everything I just went over with you. I do expect that. Beyond that, I don't think we're going to see more executive orders. Then comes the foreign policy, which is already taking place. Negotiations with Russia about the Ukraine and about the future of funding the Ukraine, which I think the United States is going to pull back on, with guarantees from Russia. He's going to say, call the ceasefire, keep what you got, and stop the fighting. That is where I think Trump comes in. Stop the fighting, take what you've got, end it. And I think that's going to work, and that will come. I said, I made a promise, a prediction to you guys. I made a prediction on the election, and I said that if Trump gets elected, by the time Trump takes office, there will not be, the hostages will be back. I'm right. Well, the process anyway. We're getting those hostages back. But yes, I was right. That hostage situation is resolved now. Why? Trump's about to be in office. I was wrong in reference to the Ukraine. I said that I expected at the least that we would be talking about a ceasefire in the Ukraine right now, or that it would already have resolved itself. And I emphasized that Russia would have already come to a ceasefire and already ended the war in the Ukraine. That's what I thought. I said that on the day of the election. I was wrong. So I got that wrong about Ukraine and the status. I think they are going to move forward. I don't think they're going to make the window of spring. They have to do this before April 1st. The Ukraine has to be in a state of ceasefire in the middle of March. And by April 1st, the farmers have to be planting in the fields to end the food crisis that has been going on since 2022 under the Biden administration. If that does not happen, if by April 1st there is not a ceasefire and or an end to the Ukraine war, and farmers are not able to go back into their fields, clear them out, and start planting by April 1st, we will continue to be in the global food crisis until 2027. You always have to push 1 year out. So that means they will not be able to plant all the food they need to in 2025. If they miss April 1st, we miss that window. That means we have to wait until the spring of 2026, which means that the food won't be able to be distributed to the world until 2027. Because you gotta plant the food, you gotta let the food grow, you gotta collect the food, then you have to distribute it. All of that takes a year. So you're always looking 1 year out. If we miss the window for April this year, the food crisis continues until 2027. That would be the soonest we can end the global food crisis. Do I think Trump will be able to get a ceasefire before the middle of March, which would allow farmers in the Ukraine to clear their fields and plant food? Almost impossible. 90% unlikely at this point. I thought we were going to get it done super fast. We didn't. And so the whole process got bogged down. It is still possible, but I think it's highly unlikely. I think we get a ceasefire and possibly an end to the war this year, but that's not enough time for the food crisis. So the food crisis will continue until 2027. I do think this year, at the latest, we will see the Ukraine war end. We will see that Russia will keep what it has captured, and the Ukraine will try to recover. And therefore, the food crisis ends in 2027. That's what I think. I was wrong before. This is my new prediction based on what is currently happening. I could be wrong again. I don't know. But at least I'm honest with you. I tell you when I get it wrong. I tell you when my predictions don't come true. I'm happy to tell you that. All right. So that's been everything I wanted to cover today. 3 hours. A lot of stuff. And I'm going to be looking at all of the coverage tomorrow of what's happening with the inauguration. I'm going to listen to what Donald Trump says about these executive orders that he has promised that he's going to do. I'm going to go over and see how the reaction is coming from the left about what Trump is saying in the inauguration speech. I'm going to be listening to that. I'm going to see what the reaction is from the left on that. I'm pretty sure that the left is going to say Trump is evil, that he's going to be a dictator, that his policies, of course, are going to strip women of all their rights. They're going to have no health care. Women will be barefoot and naked in the kitchen, and black people will be in chains, ready to be sold. That's what they're going to say from CNN, MSNBC, the left. They're going to tell you this. None of it's true. Just like the 28th Amendment isn't true. But they don't care. It's not about being truthful. It's about controlling. So they don't care that they're going to make up a bunch of lies. They don't care that Trump's going to say things that people want and that will help the nation. They don't care about that. They care about power. And so they're going to lie a lot. But I'll cover that with Larry Sharpe tomorrow on Larry Sharpe's The Sharp Way. That'll be 7 o'clock tomorrow. And I'll be happy to go over that at that time. But that's what I'm planning to do. I'm just checking all the comments here. Now, I know there are more people. Again, I know there are more people who are commenting than YouTube will allow to be seen. Same thing with Facebook. They're not letting everyone. I know people are commenting and their comments don't show up live. I apologize. That's beyond me. Hopefully, going forward, we'll see that change. Google is the last to change their policies. We've seen X change their policies and become more free. We've seen Facebook admit that they have been lying about suppressing your voice for years, and now they're trying to make amends. They're finally starting to change that policy. Google, which is a monopoly and owns YouTube, doesn't care. They are leftist. Their donations, their administration, love being far left activists. They want to continue to maintain control, that they're going to emphasize approved messaging, which is on the left, and they're going to try and shove that down your throat more. In other words, they want you to hear from The View rather than me. Because Whoopi Goldberg is somehow a international politics genius. Somehow. I don't know how, but she is, according to Google and YouTube. So you should be watching The View to listen to how Whoopi Goldberg will tell you that America is evil and so is Israel. That's what they're going to say. I don't agree with them. But that's the offer. All right. As you can hear, my voice is failing. I know it's only been 3 hours. Normally I go 5, 7 hours with no problem, but I have a cold. And my voice is starting to fail, as you can hear. And I do need my voice for tomorrow. Otherwise, I can't do the show with Larry. And I'm going to do the show with Larry. Joel says, no, I did cover that. I did cover Joel's last comment. Okay. So I need to take care of my voice. Otherwise, I won't be able to do the show tomorrow. And I've already promised that I'm going to do the show. And I like to keep my word. I don't like to not do what I say. So rather than have my voice completely disappear and then be screwed for tomorrow, we're going to end the show. It's only been 3 hours. It's incredibly short for this. Yeah, I know. We go on for hours. But we'll do a short show today. Please, if you have been following, whether you agree or not, I want to see your comments. Even if you weren't available live to make a comment, go ahead and go into the comments after the show, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or X or wherever you're seeing it, and leave a comment and say, I disagree with this part, Mike. I think Trump's going to put in this executive order or that one, that he's going to help the country or not. I'm happy to hear your voice on that. Leave that comment for me. Please subscribe. Please share this with others. Let's have the discussion. Let's remind our elected officials that we, through our free speech, get to pick the direction our nation will go in, not them. It's not their choice. It's our choice. And please, remind your elected officials, like I am, share this, and let's remind them they can't lie to us anymore. Stop lying with things like, the 28th Amendment exists. No, it doesn't. And the 14th Amendment can't be changed. Yes, it can. And we have to support Hamas. No, hell no, we don't. But that being said, I'm going to let you guys go. I look forward to seeing your comments. I thank you for your time today. If you're new to the channel and you made it this far, hey, come back again. It's always fun. It's always interesting. And I expect by next week, we will be able to take phone calls live. So I got to get the wires this week so that next weekend, you'll be able to speak live. Until that time, guys, I see you tomorrow when I speak with Larry Sharp